The blizzard came down like judgment itself, thick and blinding, turning the Montana wilderness into a wall of white chaos. Colonel James Mackenzie stood on the frozen tarmac of the compound, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his weathered field jacket, watching the sky with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. The wind cut through layers of clothing like a blade, sharp and merciless. 60 degrees below zero with the wind chill. His breath crystallized in the air before his face, each exhale a small ghost that vanished into the storm, there and gone, like so many things in his life. He was 58 years old, and every single one of those years sat heavy in his bones. The shrapnel wound in his left hip throbbed in the cold, a constant reminder of Fallujah and choices that couldn't be unmade. His right hand, scarred across the knuckles from an IED blast that had killed 3 of his Marines, ached in weather like this. The scars were white against weathered skin, a roadmap of violence written in scar tissue. Sometimes he wondered if the pain was punishment or just memory given physical form. Sometimes he wondered if there was a difference. The secure phone in his jacket buzzed. He pulled it out with fingers already going numb despite the thermal gloves, the screen's glow harsh against the white landscape. General Patterson's face filled the screen, pixelated slightly from the encrypted connection. The old man looked tired. They were all tired these days, tired of wars that never really ended, just changed locations and enemies. Colonel Mackenzie, status report. Sir, compound secure. Landing zone clear. Weather is hell, but we're operational. Patterson nodded, his jaw working like he was chewing words he didn't want to swallow. James, I'm going to be straight with you. This assignment isn't what you think it is. Mackenzie felt something cold settle in his gut that had nothing to do with the Montana winter. In 30 years of military service, he'd learned that conversations starting with, "I'm going to be straight with you," never ended well. Sir. The luminary princess. She's not just another diplomat. Intel says her former fiancé is Kale Draxus. You know that name. Mackenzie did. Every military briefing for the past 6 months had included updates on the Crothi warlord. Brutal, possessive, responsible for 3 planetary genocides and counting. The kind of enemy that made Mackenzie's old wars look like playground scuffles. The kind of monster you read about in history books and hoped you'd never face in person. I know it, sir. He followed her here, to Earth. We don't know his endgame yet, but we know he's obsessed with getting her back. Your job isn't to babysit a princess, James. It's to keep her alive long enough for us to figure out what the hell we're dealing with. Understood, sir. Patterson's expression softened just slightly, the way it did when he was about to say something personal, something that stepped outside the clean lines of military protocol. I know you requested Alaska. I know you wanted the quiet posting, but I need you here. I need someone who won't quit when things go sideways. Someone who's been through the fire and came out the other side. Mackenzie almost laughed. Came out the other side. That was one way to describe it. Crawled out broken and barely breathing was more accurate, but he kept that to himself. You didn't correct a 2-star general's metaphors, especially when they were trying to be kind. How long, sir? However long it takes. And James, I'm sorry about Rachel. I know this time of year is hard. The name hit him like a fist to the solar plexus. 5 years gone, and it still felt like yesterday. Still felt like he was holding her hand in that hospital room, watching the light fade from her eyes, hearing her last words whispered through morphine haze. Promise me you'll find joy again. He hadn't. He'd found duty instead, because duty didn't ask questions and didn't leave you hollowed out and alone at 3 in the morning when sleep wouldn't come, and the memories pressed in like water filling a sinking ship. Thank you, sir. I'll keep her safe. I know you will. Patterson out. The screen went dark. Mackenzie pocketed the phone and turned his face back to the storm. Somewhere up there in the swirling white, a shuttle was descending. Alien technology that made human spacecraft look like children's toys, carrying a princess from a dying world and all the complications that came with her. He'd read the files on the luminari. Tall, elegant, telepathic. Their skin glowed with bioluminescence when they felt strong emotions, which the xenobiologists found fascinating and Mackenzie found deeply unsettling. The idea of someone reading his thoughts, seeing into the dark corners of his mind, where he kept all the things he couldn't say out loud, made his skin crawl. He'd spent 5 years building walls around his grief, making sure no one could see how close he was to the edge. The thought of those walls being transparent to someone, with telepathy, felt like standing naked in a spotlight. But orders were orders. And if there was one thing James Mackenzie knew how to do, it was follow orders even when they led him straight into hell. The shuttle materialized out of the storm like a ghost ship, silent except for the displacement of air as it settled onto the landing pad. It was beautiful in an otherworldly way, all smooth curves and metal that seemed to shift color in the light. The entry ramp extended with a soft hydraulic hiss, and Mackenzie straightened despite the protest from his hip. First impressions mattered, especially in his line of work. Project confidence. Project control. Don't let them see the cracks. She appeared at the top of the ramp, and for a moment, just a moment, Mackenzie forgot how to breathe. The princess was tall, easily 6'2", wrapped in robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, the fabric catching the harsh glare of the compound lights and transforming it into something ethereal. But it was her skin that stopped him cold. Pale blue silver, luminescent even in the storm's fury, like she'd been carved from moonstone and given life. Her eyes were large and opalescent, shifting between shades of violet and silver as she looked down at him from the ramp. Alien. Completely, utterly alien. And yet there was something in the way she held herself, in the set of her shoulders and the slight tremor in her hands, that spoke of vulnerability that transcended species. She took a step down the ramp. The wind caught her robes, whipping them around her slender frame. She wasn't dressed for Earth weather, that much was obvious. Hell, she wasn't dressed for weather at all. The temperature would kill her in minutes if he didn't get her inside. Another step. Her foot, bare except for some kind of delicate sandal, touched the icy tarmac. She gasped, a sound that cut through the wind like a knife, and stumbled. Mackenzie moved without thinking, old reflexes taking over. He closed the distance in 3 long strides and caught her before she could fall, his hands gripping her arms to steady her against the wind that threatened to knock them both down. The contact sent a shock through him that had nothing to do with static electricity. Her skin was warm, almost feverishly so, and beneath his fingers he could feel a faint vibration, like a current of electricity running just below the surface. And there was something else. A rush of sensation that wasn't his own, wasn't from his body or his mind. Emotion washing over him in waves that felt foreign and familiar all at once. Concern, embarrassment, fear, and underneath it all, a deep, bone-deep loneliness that made his chest ache with recognition because he knew that feeling, had lived with it for 5 years, had made it his constant companion in the hollow spaces Rachel had left behind. He realized she was reading him too. Her eyes had gone wide, locked on his face with an intensity that made him want to look away, want to rebuild his walls, want to hide. But he held her gaze because that's what you did in situations like this. You didn't flinch. You didn't show weakness. You, she said, and her voice was like music played on crystal chimes, clear and resonant even over the howl of the wind. You feel like winter. Ma'am. Cold on the outside, but there's fire buried deep. I can feel it. Old fire banked low, almost forgotten, but still burning. Mackenzie gently released her arms and stepped back, uncomfortable with the accuracy of her assessment, with the way she'd seen through 30 years of military discipline and 5 years of carefully constructed emotional armor in the space of a heartbeat. He'd spent so long making sure no one could see the fire, making sure it stayed buried where it couldn't hurt anyone, couldn't make him vulnerable. And this alien princess had found it in seconds with a single touch. "Your Highness," he said, keeping his voice professional and neutral, a refuge in familiar protocol. "Let's get you inside before you freeze to death. Welcome to Earth." She studied him for a long moment, those strange eyes seeing too much, reading emotions he'd tried so hard to hide. Then she nodded slowly, pulling her robes tighter around herself against the cold that was already making her shiver. "Thank you," she said, and then softer, "I'm sorry. The telepathy, I don't mean to intrude. Strong emotions are hard to ignore." "Not a problem, ma'am. Let's move." He turned and started toward the main building, shortening his stride so she could keep up on feet that were clearly not designed for ice and snow. Behind them, the shuttle's crew was already unloading cargo containers, moving with efficient silence. The compound's security team had materialized from their positions, forming a loose protective cordon around the princess. Professional, prepared. But Mackenzie could feel their curiosity, their uncertainty. First contact with aliens was still new enough to make everyone nervous. The wind howled around them like a living thing, driving ice crystals that stung exposed skin like tiny needles. The princess was shivering violently by the time they reached the entrance, her luminescent skin flickering like a candle in a draft, the glow dimming with each step. Hypothermia setting in fast. He needed to get her warm. Now. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wall. The compound's main building was utilitarian military construction, all concrete and steel in function over form. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh white light that bleached out color and made everyone look slightly ill. The air smelled of coffee and gun oil and the particular mustiness of a building that had been sealed against the outside world for too long. Not welcoming, not beautiful, but functional, safe. The princess looked around with barely concealed disappointment, her glow dimming further as she took in the stark corridors and bare walls. Whatever she'd been expecting, this clearly wasn't it. Mackenzie felt a small flicker of something that might have been defensiveness. The compound wasn't much to look at, but it was secure. It did its job. That should be enough. "Your quarters are on the second floor," Mackenzie said, starting toward the stairs. "I'll show you the way." They climbed in silence, her footsteps whisper soft behind him, his own boots heavy on the metal stairs. The sound echoed in the stairwell, emphasizing how quiet she was, how different. Down a corridor lined with identical doors, each marked with a number and nothing else. Efficient, impersonal, military. He stopped at 214 and keyed in the access code. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss to reveal a room that was clean, secure, and completely devoid of personality. Standard military quarters. Bed, desk, chair, small attached bathroom. A single window looked out over the compound, though right now all it showed was the white fury of the storm, snow horizontal in the wind, visibility zero. The princess stepped inside and stood in the center of the room, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the stark functionality of it all. Her glow had faded to almost nothing, just a faint shimmer like heat haze. She looked exhausted, lost, alone. "On my world," she said quietly, not looking at him, "we value beauty. This is." She trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't give offense, wouldn't sound ungrateful. "Functional," Mackenzie supplied, his voice harder than he'd intended. "It's secure, ma'am. That's what matters." She turned to face him, and he saw something flash across her features. Anger, maybe, or hurt. Her skin flickered with color, a brief flash of yellow that the xenobiology files had labeled as distress. "Beauty matters too, Colonel. Beauty reminds us why we fight to survive, why we endure. This." She gestured at the bare walls, the utilitarian furniture, the complete absence of anything personal or warm. "This is a cage with better lighting." Mackenzie felt his jaw tighten. He'd slept in worse places. A lot worse. Bombed-out buildings in Ramadi where you could see stars through the roof. Foxholes in the Hindu Kush where the temperature dropped below freezing and you shared space with scorpions. At least this room had 4 walls and a roof that didn't leak and running water. At least she wasn't going to die of exposure or enemy fire in the middle of the night. Beauty doesn't stop bullets, Your Highness. Armor plating and secure doors do. You want to redecorate, that's your business. But my job is to keep you alive, not to make you comfortable. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, sharp edges he hadn't meant to show. He saw her flinch, saw her skin dim slightly, the glow fading like someone had turned down a dimmer switch. Saw her wrap her arms around herself in a gesture that was pure vulnerability, pure hurt. "You don't want to be here," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, read from his emotions as easily as reading words on a page. "I go where I'm ordered, ma'am." "But you think I'm a burden, a complication." He could have lied, should have lied. Military diplomacy demanded it. But 5 years of grief had burned away his ability to pretend, had stripped away the polite fictions people used to smooth social interactions. "I think complications get people killed," he said. "I think in my experience, the simpler the mission, the better chance everyone has of going home alive. And you, Your Highness, are the most complicated mission I've had in a long time." She studied him with those 2 knowing eyes, her telepathy reading the truth beneath his words, feeling the emotions he tried so hard to keep locked down. He wondered what she was seeing, what she was feeling from him. Anger at the assignment he didn't want. Grief still raw after 5 years. Fear that he'd fail, that someone would die on his watch again, that he'd have to add more names to the list of people he couldn't save. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice small. "I didn't choose this either. Being sent to a world I don't understand, surrounded by people who see me as a problem to be solved. I didn't choose any of it." The admission took the wind out of his sails. He recognized that tone. The weariness of someone who'd stopped fighting circumstances beyond their control and just started enduring. He'd heard it in his own voice often enough. "Get some rest," he said, gentler now, some of the edge smoothed away. "It's been a long day for both of us. I'll be outside if you need anything. Just call." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him at the door. "Colonel, what do I call you, if not by your rank?" He looked back at her, this luminescent creature from the stars who somehow managed to look lost and regal at the same time, standing alone in a sterile room that had never been meant to hold anything beautiful. "Mackenzie," he said, "just Mackenzie." She nodded slowly, processing this small offering of informality, this tiny crack in his professional armor. "Then you may call me Seraphine, not Your Highness, not ma'am, just Seraphine." Something in her voice when she said her own name. A longing, maybe, to be seen as a person instead of a title, to be treated as something other than political property or a problem to be solved. He understood that more than she knew. How many times had he wanted people to see past the rank, past the uniform, past the professional mask to the person underneath? "All right," he said, "Seraphine." He stepped out into the corridor, and the door slid shut behind him, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the dull ache in his hip, and the memory of how warm her skin had been beneath his hands, how her telepathy had touched his mind for just a moment and seen things he'd tried so hard to hide. This was going to be a long assignment. The first 3 days established a routine that felt both familiar and strange. Mackenzie shadowed Seraphine through her schedule, which consisted mostly of meetings with UN representatives and various diplomatic officials who wanted to discuss potential alliance terms with the Luminari. He stood 3 paces behind her and to the left, hands clasped behind his back in parade rest, eyes constantly scanning for threats that never materialized. Boring work, but necessary. She noticed everything. He realized that on day 2, when she asked him about the scars on his hands during a break between meetings. They'd been standing in a corridor waiting for the next session to begin, and she'd simply turned to him and asked, her voice curious but not intrusive. "Your hands, the scars, where did they come from?" He'd looked down at his hands, at the white lines across his knuckles that he usually didn't notice anymore. Just part of his landscape, part of what his body had become over 30 years of service. "Old war wounds," he'd said, deflecting. "Not interesting." She'd let it drop, but he'd seen the way her eyes lingered on them, the way her expression softened with something that looked uncomfortably like pity or compassion or understanding. He didn't want her pity, didn't want anyone's pity. The scars were just facts, evidence of survival, nothing more. But she kept noticing things. The way he favored his left leg when he was tired. The tension he carried in his shoulders. The fact that he never ate until everyone else had been served, old military habit that said officers ate last. Small details that added up to a picture of who he was, built from observation, and whatever she picked up through her telepathy. The compound's head of xenobiology, Dr. Evelyn Torres, cornered him on day 3. Evelyn was an old friend, had been since they'd both been stationed in Germany back when they were young and stupid and thought they'd live forever. She'd gone into research, he'd stayed in the field. They'd both paid prices for their choices, just different ones. She found him in the compound's small gym at 6 in the morning, when he thought he'd be alone. He was working the heavy bag, trying to sweat out the nightmares that had woken him at 4. The old familiar ones. Baghdad, Helmand Province. The hospital room with Rachel, her hand growing cold in his, the monitor's flat line that meant everything was over. "You're pulling your left cross," she said from the doorway, her voice cutting through the rhythm of fists hitting leather. "Hip bothering you again." He stopped, breathing hard, and wiped sweat from his face with the back of his hand. His heart was pounding, adrenaline still high from the nightmares and the physical exertion. "Morning, Evelyn." She walked over, lab coat incongruous against the backdrop of weight racks and punching bags. She'd aged well, he thought. Gray in her dark hair now, but still the same sharp eyes that missed nothing. Still the same directness that had made her a good friend and a dangerous poker opponent. "I talked to Seraphine yesterday," she said without preamble. "She's worried about you." "She shouldn't be. I'm not her concern." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, the expression saying more than words could about what she thought of that statement. "James, she's telepathic. She can feel your emotions whether you want her to or not. And apparently, you're broadcasting pain and grief loud enough that she can barely sleep." "That's not my problem." "The hell it isn't." Evelyn's voice went hard, the tone she used when she was done being patient. "You want to do your job? Then stop treating her like a problem and start treating her like a person. She's been through hell, James. Her ex-fiancé is a monster who makes Saddam look like a choir boy. She escaped him by the skin of her teeth. Came here hoping to find sanctuary for her entire species. And instead she gets you, all locked up and bleeding internally, making her feel like she's an imposition." Mackenzie felt anger flash hot in his chest, defensive and sharp. He turned back to the bag, drove his fist into it hard enough to make the chain rattle and his knuckles ache. "I didn't ask for this assignment." "No, you asked for Alaska. You asked to be put somewhere quiet where you could drink yourself to death in peace. I read your psych evals, James. I know what anniversary is coming up." The words hit like body blows, each one finding a target he'd left exposed. He stopped, hands falling to his sides, breathing hard from exertion and emotion. "Don't," he said quietly, a warning. "It's been 5 years. Rachel wouldn't want this. You know she wouldn't." "Rachel's dead, Evelyn. What she wants doesn't matter anymore." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. When Evelyn spoke again, her voice had gentled, the anger replaced by something that looked like concern, like the kind of care that hurt because it touched places you'd tried to protect. That girl upstairs, she's dying inside. Her son is collapsing. Her people have maybe 20 years before their entire world becomes uninhabitable. She's carrying the weight of 3 million lives on her shoulders, and she's terrified she's going to fail them. The least you could do is not make her feel like she's failing at basic human. She paused. Alien connection, too. Mackenzie closed his eyes, breathed, tried to find some kind of center that didn't hurt, some place inside himself that wasn't all sharp edges and old wounds. What do you want from me? Just talk to her, like she's a person instead of a mission parameter. You used to be good at that, before. Before, the word hung in the air between them, loaded with everything it didn't say. Before the war. Before Rachel. Before he'd learned that caring about people just meant watching them die and carrying their ghosts around forever. I'll try, he said finally. It was the best he could offer. The most honest answer he had. Evelyn squeezed his shoulder, the way she used to back when they were young and thought friendship could fix anything. That's all anyone can ask. She left him there with the heavy bag and his thoughts. He stood for a long time, just breathing, feeling the sweat cool on his skin, and the ache in his knuckles, and the larger ache somewhere deeper that he'd been trying to punch his way through for 5 years with no success. Finally, he headed for the showers. He had work to do. And maybe, just maybe, he could try being less of an asshole to the alien princess who was trying to save her entire species while dealing with a bodyguard who treated her like a burden. That night, he found himself in the compound's small library at 2 in the morning. Insomnia was an old companion. He'd learned to work with it instead of fighting it, had developed a routine of reading until exhaustion finally dragged him under. Usually, he read technical manuals or after-action reports. Anything dry enough to quiet his mind without engaging his emotions. Tonight, he'd pulled up files on the Luminari. Might as well learn something about the species he was protecting. Might as well understand what he was dealing with. The data was fascinating in a clinical way. The Luminari had evolved on a world with 2 suns, which explained their bioluminescence. It was a form of thermoregulation originally, a way to shed excess heat absorbed from constant daylight. Over millions of years, it had become tied to their emotional state, a visible expression of internal experience. Anger burned red. Joy shone gold. Sadness dimmed to almost nothing. Their telepathy was limited, the files explained. They could read surface emotions, not thoughts. Strong feelings broadcast louder, clearer. They couldn't shut it off, which meant they were constantly swimming in the emotional states of everyone around them, an endless ocean of other people's feelings that they had to navigate every moment of every day. He wondered what that was like, to never have privacy from feeling, to always know if someone was lying, was angry, was afraid. Seemed exhausting. Seemed like it would be impossible to maintain any kind of emotional boundaries when everyone's feelings were constantly bleeding into yours. Further into the files, the Luminari were a peaceful species, no major wars in their recorded history. Conflicts were resolved through telepathic consensus building, through feeling each other's perspectives until understanding emerged. The concept of violence was so foreign to them that they developed almost no defensive capabilities, had no military tradition, had built their entire civilization on the assumption that reason and empathy could solve any problem. Which made them easy prey for species like the Croth. He found the file on Kale Draxus and his jaw clenched as he read. The warlord had conquered 12 systems. His methodology was always the same. Identify the leadership, usually someone young and beautiful if possible, and make them an offer. Marriage or massacre. Alliance through subjugation. Submit or watch your world burn. Most chose marriage. The ones who didn't. The files included images Mackenzie wished he could unsee. Entire populations reduced to ash. Cities turned to glass. The kind of destruction that served no tactical purpose, that was pure terrorism, pure demonstration of power. Seraphine had been engaged to this monster for 3 years. The wedding had been scheduled, invitations sent across a dozen systems, when she'd fled. Stolen a ship with her advisor's help and run with just the clothes on her back and one attendant. Kale had hunted her across 5 systems before she'd made it to Earth, each near miss documented in intelligence reports that read like horror stories. And now he was here, somewhere in orbit according to the latest intelligence, watching, waiting, a predator who'd found his escaped prey and was deciding when to strike. Mackenzie sat back in his chair and rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of what he'd just read. Complications. He'd been right about that part, but maybe some complications were worth protecting. Maybe some people deserved a chance to escape their monsters and build something new. I can't sleep either. He jerked around, instincts bringing his hand to where his weapon would be if he was armed. Seraphine stood in the doorway, wrapped in a simple robe that somehow still managed to look elegant. Her skin glowed softly in the dim light, a gentle blue that reminded him of moonlight on snow, peaceful and otherworldly. Your Highness, I didn't hear you come in. Seraphine, she corrected gently, a reminder of the informality she'd offered. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I felt. She gestured vaguely. Wakefulness. Coming from this direction, I thought perhaps you might want company. He should have said no. Should have sent her back to her quarters. Maintaining professional distance was important, especially in close protection details. But the library felt very large and very empty with just him in it, and he found himself gesturing to the chair across from his instead. Can't sleep, he asked, minimizing the files he'd been reading. No need for her to know he'd been researching her nightmare. She settled into the chair with a grace that seemed innate to her species, every movement fluid and precise. The nightmares are worse here. On my world, there were always others nearby. Telepathic presence, even sleeping, provides a kind of. She searched for the word. Comfort. A sense of not being alone even in sleep. Here, I'm alone in my head. It's very quiet. Too quiet. That sounds peaceful to me. A soft smile touched her lips. Perhaps we want what we don't have. I long for silence. You seem to long for connection. The word hit too close to home. Mackenzie looked away, focusing on the tablet in front of him instead of her too perceptive gaze. I was reading about your people, he said, changing the subject. Interesting culture. We're dying, Seraphine said bluntly, cutting through his deflection. Our culture won't matter much if we're extinct in 20 years. The UN is working on it. I'm sure they'll find a solution. Will they? She leaned forward slightly, her intensity making the space between them feel smaller. Your people are afraid of us, Colonel. Mackenzie. They smile and make polite conversation, but I can feel their fear. Fear of our telepathy, fear of our differences, fear that will be a burden on your resources, fear that helping us will bring Kale's wrath down on Earth. You're not wrong, he admitted. People fear what they don't understand. It's human nature. Is it? She tilted her head, studying him with those large eyes. Or is it a choice? I don't understand your species either. You're violent and territorial and you lie even to yourselves. But I'm not afraid of you. Maybe you should be. The words came out harder than he'd intended, sharp edges showing. Seraphine's glow dimmed slightly, her equivalent of flinching. Why? Because you're a soldier. Because you've killed. Because I'm good at it, Mackenzie said, meeting her eyes. Because I've spent 30 years learning how to end lives efficiently. Because there's a part of me that's broken in a way that your peaceful species could never understand. Because I've done things that would horrify you if you knew. I don't believe you're broken. You don't know me. Her eyes met his, that unnerving direct gaze that felt like it was looking through his skull directly into his soul. I know you've lost someone. Recently. The grief comes off you in waves. 5 years isn't recent. It is when you haven't processed it. He stood abruptly, needing distance, needing to move, needing to not be pinned under that understanding gaze. Walked to the window that looked out over the compound. Snow was falling again, soft and steady, covering everything in white, erasing the scars the world accumulated during the day. Temporary peace before morning came and revealed everything again. Her name was Rachel, he heard himself say, the words coming without permission. My wife, cancer, they gave her 6 months. She lasted 8, fighting the whole way. He stopped, swallowed against the tightness in his throat. Strong, stronger than me. Seraphine's reflection appeared in the glass beside his. She'd moved quietly, standing just close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, but not touching, respecting his need for space. You loved her very much. More than anything. And now you feel guilty, for being alive when she's not. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer anyway, didn't need to. The telepathy read the truth directly from his emotions. On my world, Seraphine said quietly, we believe that love doesn't end with death. The emotional bonds remain, grow stronger even. The people we lose become part of us. Their light joins our light. That's beautiful, Mackenzie said, his voice rough, and impossible. Why impossible? Because light fades, everything fades eventually. That's just physics. She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke her voice carried absolute certainty. You're wrong. Some lights burn forever. We just have to choose to keep seeing them. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was naive, that she didn't understand how the universe really worked, that everything ended and faded and turned to dust given enough time. But something in her voice stopped him. A certainty that went deeper than philosophy, that came from somewhere personal. What did you lose? He asked instead, turning to face her. What light are you still seeing? Everything, she said simply. Her glow shifted, taking on that yellow tinge of distress. My world, my family, my freedom. 3 years as Cale's prisoner, wearing his ring, smiling for the cameras while She stopped. Her glow flickered, the light unstable, while he taught me what it meant to be owned. Mackenzie turned to look at her fully. She was staring out at the snow, her expression distant, lost in memories that clearly still had the power to hurt her. He hurt you. Not physically. The Croth I value beauty. He would never damage something he considered his property. But there are other ways to break someone. She took a shaky breath, her luminescence dimming further. Telepathy works both ways, Colonel. He learned to project his desires, his anger directly into my mind, hours at a time, until I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine and which were his. Jesus. I fled the moment I found an opening. My advisor, Elder Lyron, created a distraction during a state dinner. We had a 15-minute head start. We ran for 3 months before reaching Earth, and even now. She wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture of self-protection that was heartbreakingly human. Even now I feel him looking for me, his obsession. It tastes like copper and rage. And you think you're safe here? It wasn't a question, and she didn't pretend it was. I think I'm safer here than anywhere else I could run. And I think, her voice dropped, I think if I don't stop running eventually, I'll lose myself completely. I'll become nothing but fear and motion. At least here, I have a chance to stand and fight. You can't fight him, Seraphine. I read his file. He's destroyed entire civilizations. Then I'll die fighting, she said with sudden fierceness that made her glow flare bright. But I'll die as myself, not as his possession, not as a thing he owns, as a person who chose her own fate. The words hung between them, testament to a kind of courage Mackenzie recognized. The courage of someone who'd been broken but refused to stay broken, who'd been a victim but refused to remain one. He'd seen it in Marines who'd survived captivity, in refugees who'd lost everything but kept moving forward. The kind of courage that didn't come from never being afraid, but from being terrified and choosing to act anyway. "I won't let him take you," he said, the promise coming from somewhere deep, somewhere he'd thought had died with Rachel. She looked up at him, surprise clear in her features, her glow brightening slightly. "Why? You said I was a complication. That complications get people killed." "You are, but you're also." He struggled for the words, for some way to articulate what he was feeling that didn't sound like sentiment or weakness. "A person. Someone who's been hurt and is trying to survive. I know what that looks like. And for what it's worth, I think you're brave as hell." Her skin flared suddenly bright, a warm gold that lit up the small library like sunrise. She caught herself, embarrassed, and tried to dim it back down. "Sorry, strong emotions." "Don't apologize for feeling things," Mackenzie said. "World needs more of that, not less." They stood there in the quiet, snow falling outside, two damaged people from different worlds trying to make sense of the darkness they'd both survived. Finding unexpected common ground in shared understanding of what it meant to carry grief and fear and still choose to keep moving forward. Finally, Seraphine said, "Thank you for talking to me, for seeing me, for not treating me like a problem you have to solve." "Get some sleep," he said gruffly, uncomfortable with the gratitude, with the connection forming between them that felt dangerous, because it meant caring and caring meant vulnerability. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She nodded and started toward the door, then paused at the threshold. "Colonel Mackenzie, will you tell me about her sometime? About Rachel?" He didn't answer right away. Didn't know if he could, if talking about her would open wounds he'd worked so hard to seal. But finally he said, maybe, someday. She smiled, small and genuine, an expression that transformed her face from alien to simply beautiful. "Thank you." She left. Mackenzie stood alone in the library for a long time after that, watching the snow and thinking about light and darkness and the space between them where people tried to build something worth holding onto. Thinking about how he'd spent 5 years trying not to feel anything, and how this alien princess had made him feel more in 3 days than he had in all that time. Dangerous, but maybe not entirely bad. Day 4 brought the first real threat. Mackenzie was shadowing Seraphine through yet another diplomatic meeting, this one with representatives from the European Union. The conference room was too warm, the heating system overcompensating for the bitter cold outside. The discussion was going in circles about resource allocation and refugee protocols. Standard bureaucratic dance that would take weeks to resolve. He was scanning the room out of habit, cataloging exits and potential threats, when his secure earpiece crackled to life. "Colonel, this is Control. We have multiple bogies approaching the compound. High speed, unknown configuration." "Copy that, ETA." 90 seconds. "Sir, they're not broadcasting any IFF codes. Recommend immediate lockdown." Mackenzie didn't hesitate. He crossed to where Seraphine sat at the conference table, leaned down and spoke quietly but with unmistakable urgency. "We need to go, now." She looked up, startled, her glow flickering with surprise. "But the meeting is over. Come with me, please." Something in his tone, in the absolute certainty of his command presence, convinced her. She stood, apologizing to the confused diplomats in multiple languages. Mackenzie had his hand on her elbow, not grabbing but guiding, steering her toward the door with gentle but inexorable pressure. They were halfway to the exit when the first explosion hit. The building shook like an earthquake had struck. Lights flickered and died, emergency lighting kicking in seconds later, bathing everything in red. Somewhere an alarm began to wail, a sound designed to cut through confusion and galvanize action. "Basement," Mackenzie said, already moving, one hand still on Seraphine's arm. "Stay close to me. Don't let go." They ran, him leading, her keeping pace better than he'd expected for someone in flowing robes who'd never trained for this. Behind them, he could hear shouting, the sound of security teams mobilizing, boots on tile, orders being barked. Another explosion, closer this time. The concussion made his ears ring, made the world briefly compress into ringing silence before sound returned muted and strange. They hit the stairwell. Mackenzie went down first, weapon drawn now, clearing each landing with practiced efficiency before motioning her forward with sharp hand signals. His training took over, sharp and clear. Every sense heightened, every nerve alive. This was what he knew. This was what he was good at. The chaos and the danger and the absolute clarity that came from life or death decisions. The basement level was a hardened bunker, designed to withstand everything short of a direct nuclear strike. He keyed in the access code one-handed, pulled Seraphine inside as soon as the door cracked open, sealed it behind them with a finality that meant safety, at least temporarily. The bunker was small, maybe 20 by 20 feet. Reinforced concrete walls thick enough to stop anything short of a bunker buster. Emergency supplies stacked along one wall. A bank of monitors showing security feeds from around the compound, multiple angles on the chaos unfolding above. Mackenzie immediately went to the monitors, his tactical mind processing what he saw with the detached efficiency of long practice. What he saw made his blood run cold. Drones, 6 of them, sleek and deadly, moving with inhuman precision through the compound like sharks through water. They were tearing through the defenses like tissue paper, energy weapons cutting through reinforced concrete like it wasn't even there. He watched as one of them carved through a wall, the material glowing red then white, then simply ceasing to exist, molecular bonds broken by whatever exotic physics they were using. On another screen, he saw Sergeant Cross leading a fire team, trying to establish a defensive position. Brave kid. Stupid but brave. The team opened up with everything they had, rifles and machine guns and even a shoulder-mounted rocket. The drone's shields flickered but held, the energy of the impacts spreading across invisible barriers like ripples on water. "Kale," Seraphine whispered behind him, her voice small and terrified. She was standing close, staring at the screens with wide eyes. Those are his. Crothi military drones. He sent them. "Test run," Mackenzie said grimly, his mind already working through defensive options and finding them all inadequate. "He's probing our defenses, seeing what we can handle, seeing how we respond." One of the drones shifted direction, heading toward the main building where the evacuation was still ongoing. Toward where the diplomats were, toward civilians who had no business being anywhere near a combat zone. "I have to go back up there," Mackenzie said, already moving toward the door. "Help with the evacuation. Coordinate the defense." "No," Seraphine grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your job is to protect me. That's what they ordered you to do." "My job is to protect people. You're safe down here. They're not." He pulled free, heading for the door, but her voice stopped him. Not physically, but the raw emotion in it, the fear and vulnerability that cut through his tactical focus. "Please, don't leave me alone." The fear in her voice, raw and real and completely understandable. He turned back. She was glowing bright white now, stressed beyond her ability to control it, her bioluminescence a visual representation of terror that she couldn't hide. "I'll come back," he said, knowing it might be a lie but needing to offer something. "I promise." That's what people always say, right before they don't. He thought about making more promises he might not be able to keep. decided on honesty instead, on treating her like the intelligent adult she was rather than placating her with comfortable lies. Then watch the monitors. If I don't make it back in 15 minutes, there's an emergency tunnel that leads 3 miles east. GPS coordinates are in the computer. Follow them and don't stop until you reach the safe house. Keep moving, keep surviving, that's an order. Mackenzie. He looked at her one more time, tried to memorize the way she looked standing there, luminescent and terrified, and trying so hard to be brave despite the fear. Tried to capture this moment in case it was the last one they had. I'll be back. Then he was through the door and running, taking the stairs 3 at a time, ignoring the protest from his hip, pushing his aging body to respond the way it had 20 years ago when he was younger and faster and thought he was immortal. The compound was chaos, smoke and screaming and the shriek of energy weapons cutting through matter that wasn't designed to stop them. Mackenzie moved through it with the calm of long practice. Fear was there, always there, but it was background noise. The mission was what mattered, getting people to safety. That was the mission. He found Sergeant Cross pinned down in the east corridor, 3 civilians huddled behind him. The sergeant's left arm was bleeding through his uniform, but he was still firing, still fighting, weapon bucking in his hands as he laid down covering fire against something that could shrug off bullets like rain. Cross, Mackenzie slid into cover beside him, concrete chips spraying from a near miss. Report. 6 tangos, sir. Shields are too strong, we can't punch through. Nothing's working. Then we don't punch through. We go around. Mackenzie pulled a flashbang from his vest, old tech but still effective. On my mark, fall back to the secondary stairwell. I'll cover. Sir, you can't. That's an order, Sergeant. Cross hesitated, the urge to argue visible on his face but training won out. Yes, sir. Mackenzie counted down from 3 with his fingers, each second an eternity compressed into heartbeats. On 0, he pulled the pin and threw with the accuracy that came from doing this hundreds of times in combat zones around the world. The flashbang detonated in a supernova of light and sound, sensory overload designed to incapacitate human targets. The drone's sensors scrambled for precious seconds, their targeting systems overwhelmed by input they weren't designed to filter. It was enough. Cross got the civilians moving, shepherding them toward safety with efficiency born of training and fear. Mackenzie backed up step by step, firing controlled bursts, drawing the drone's attention, making himself the target to give others time to escape. His hip was screaming, but he ignored it. Pain was information. You didn't have to listen. You just had to keep moving. One of the drones locked onto him. He saw the energy weapon charging, that telltale blue glow that preceded violence. Knew he couldn't dodge in time, that he'd pushed his luck too far this time. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Mackenzie spun. Dr. Torres stood in the doorway 20 feet away, shoulder-mounted rocket launcher still smoking in her hands, her lab coat incongruous against the military hardware. Evelyn. She shrugged, already loading another rocket with practiced efficiency. Xenobiology gets boring. I cross-trained in munitions. Move. They ran together, Torres covering their retreat with a second rocket that took out another drone, the explosion close enough that Mackenzie felt the heat wash over them. Behind them, the compound was being systematically destroyed, each explosion a hammer blow against infrastructure and safety. But the people were getting out. That was what mattered. The people were surviving. They made it to the bunker 17 minutes after Mackenzie had left. Seraphine was exactly where he'd left her, staring at the monitors with wide eyes that were tracking his every movement on the security feeds. When she saw him, when the door opened, and he stepped through alive and whole if battered, her glow flared so bright it hurt to look at. You came back. Said I would. Tors secured the door behind them, her hands shaking slightly from adrenaline crash. On the monitors, the drones were pulling back, their test run complete. They'd gotten what they came for, data on Earth's defensive capabilities, proof that they could hit the compound whenever they wanted, a message delivered in violence and destruction. In the sudden quiet, the absence of explosions and weapons fire almost louder than the combat had been, Mackenzie became aware of the blood running down his side. Shrapnel, probably. Nothing vital hit or he'd already be down, but the wound was real enough, pain finally cutting through the adrenaline now that immediate danger had passed. Sit, Tors ordered, her doctor voice brooking no argument. Let me look at that. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your jacket. Sit down before you fall down. He sat, suddenly exhausted, the adrenaline draining away and leaving nothing but fatigue and pain. Seraphine knelt beside him, her hands hovering over his wounds like she wanted to help but didn't know how, her glow shifting colors with emotion too fast to track. Tors cut away his jacket and shirt with efficient movements, the medical training she'd maintained alongside her research skills. The wound was ugly, but Tors was right, nothing vital. She cleaned it with antiseptic that burned like hellfire, made Mackenzie's breath hiss through his teeth despite his attempts to stay stoic. You took a piece of shrapnel in Fallujah, Seraphine said quietly, her eyes distant like she was seeing something that wasn't in the room. Left hip. It still hurts when the weather changes. You broke 3 ribs in Helmand when an IED threw you into a wall. You have scars on your hands from when you pulled 2 Marines out of a burning vehicle. You don't sleep well because you dream about the ones you couldn't save. Mackenzie stared at her, uncomfortable with how much she knew, how deeply she'd seen into memories he'd tried to keep private. How? I touched you, earlier, when you caught me on the landing pad. Sometimes I see things when I make physical contact. Memories attached to strong emotions. I didn't mean to pry, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for surviving, Tors said, taping off the bandage with brisk efficiency. We all do what we have to. The monitors showed the compound, damaged but standing. Casualties were being tallied, numbers scrolling across screens. 4 wounded, none dead. Could have been so much worse. Should have been so much worse. He sent a message, Seraphine said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale, while you were gone. She pointed to one of the screens where a recorded transmission was queued up, waiting. Play it, Mackenzie said, needing to know, needing to see the face of the monster who'd done this. The screen filled with a face that could have been carved from nightmares. Kale Draxus was massive even by Crothe standards, his bulk filling the frame. His skin was dark scales over corded muscle, each scale looking like it could turn a knife. His eyes were solid black, no whites, no iris, just endless dark like looking into a void that looked back. When he smiled, he showed rows of serrated teeth designed for tearing meat. Seraphine, my beloved. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying across space like thunder. Did you enjoy my gift? Consider it a demonstration. Earth's defenses are inadequate. You will return to me within 14 days, or I will level every city on this pathetic planet. I am patient. I am generous. But I am not. Forgiving. 14 days, my love. The clock is ticking. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. The bunker was very quiet, the silence heavy with implications and fear, and the weight of an impossible choice. Finally, Seraphine said, her voice steady despite the fear he could see in her eyes, I should go. I should return to him. I can't let him destroy your world because of me. No. The word came out harder than Mackenzie intended, loud in the small space. Both women looked at him. You're not going anywhere, he said, meeting Seraphine's eyes. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Her voice was reasonable, logical, the tone of someone who'd already made the decision and was just waiting for others to accept it. There's always another way. We just haven't found it yet. Thornak won't stop. He'll come and come and come until he has me, or until there's nothing left to take me from. Then we make damn sure he doesn't get you. That's not negotiable. Tors was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between concern and understanding. Colonel, we need to brief the general. This changes everything. I know. He stood, testing his weight on his injured side. Manageable. Pain he could work through. Get Seraphine somewhere secure. I'll handle the briefing. James, Tors said quietly, using his first name in a way she rarely did. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't plan to. He left them there and headed upstairs into the damaged compound, into the aftermath of violence, into the complications that were only going to get worse. But for the first time in 5 years, he felt something other than empty routine. He felt purpose. And it terrified him how much of that purpose was tied to keeping one luminescent alien princess alive and free. How much it mattered. How much she was starting to matter. Complications, he thought again. But maybe, just maybe, some complications were worth it. The UN Security Council vote came through at 600 hours. Mackenzie stood in the command center with Seraphine beside him, both of them staring at the screen as the numbers populated. 12 member nations. 7 votes needed to pass the resolution. The resolution to hand Seraphine over to Kale Draxus. The first vote appeared. France, no. Mackenzie felt Seraphine's hand find his. Her skin was cold for once, all the warmth drained out of her. United Kingdom, no. China, abstain. Russia, abstain. The votes kept coming, each one a judgment, each one deciding whether one person's freedom was worth the risk of planetary destruction. United States, no. Seraphine's hand tightened in his. When the final tally appeared, Mackenzie felt something in his chest release. 7 no votes, 4 abstentions, 1 yes. The resolution had failed. Earth would not hand over Seraphine Alyr. Earth would fight. Around them, the command center erupted in controlled chaos, orders being shouted, defensive positions being coordinated, every military installation on the planet going to full alert, humanity preparing for a war it had no chance of winning. Seraphine was crying, silent tears that glowed as they tracked down her face. Mackenzie turned to her, kept his voice low. You're safe, for now. She looked up at him with those impossible eyes. I've doomed you all. No, we made a choice to stand up to a bully instead of giving him what he wants. That's not doom, that's courage. Courage won't stop his fleet. Maybe not, but it's a start. Dr. Tors appeared in the doorway, her expression urgent. Colonel, we need you in Lab 7. Now. What's happened? Just come, both of you. They followed Tors through corridors that bustled with activity. Soldiers moving with purpose. Scientists carrying equipment. Everyone preparing for an ending that seemed inevitable. Lab 7 was deep in the compound's research wing. Tors keyed them in and sealed the door behind them. Inside, Elder Lyron stood beside a holographic display showing star charts and mathematical equations that made Mackenzie's head hurt just looking at them. The luminary elder turned. Their expression was grave. Colonel Mackenzie, Princess, I have been working with Dr. Tors on a potential solution to our predicament. I'm listening, Mackenzie said. Tors brought up a new display. It showed Kale's fleet in orbit, rendered in brutal detail. 200 warships, enough firepower to crack continents. Standard military doctrine says we can't win, Tors said. They outgun us, outman us, out-tech us in every possible way. Agreed, Mackenzie said. So what's the play? We don't fight his fleet. Tors smiled grimly. We fight him. Seraphine stepped forward. I don't understand. Crothay culture is built on personal dominance, Elder Lyron explained. Their leaders maintain power through individual combat prowess. If Kale is challenged and defeated in single combat, his authority collapses. His fleet would be bound by honor to withdraw. You want to challenge him to a duel, Mackenzie said flatly. Not you. Tors pulled up a new file. We've been analyzing Kale's combat history. He's undefeated in personal combat. 47 challenges over his lifetime. He killed every single opponent. Then how do we beat him? We don't. Tors looked at Seraphine. She does. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. No, Mackenzie said immediately. Absolutely not. It's the only way, Elder Lyron said quietly. Crothay law allows the disputed party to name a champion, but it also allows them to fight personally. If Seraphine challenges Kale directly, he cannot refuse without losing face. And if she wins... She won't win. Mackenzie's voice was hard. Have you seen the combat footage? He tears opponents apart. He's 8 feet of engineered killing machine. She's... I'm standing right here, Seraphine said softly, and I can speak for myself. Mackenzie turned to her. You can't be seriously considering this. What choice do I have? Let billions die, or fight? Fighting him is suicide. Perhaps her voice was calm. Too calm, but it's my choice to make, my life, my decision. The hell it is. I'm supposed to protect you. You are protecting me, by letting me do what I need to do. Tors cleared her throat. There's more. We've been studying luminary physiology. Your people have abilities you don't use. Defensive capabilities that evolved millions of years ago before your civilization became peaceful. What kind of abilities? Seraphine asked. Elder Lyron's expression was troubled. Telepathic warfare, direct psychic attack. It was banned on our world 10,000 years ago, considered barbaric, inhumane, but the capability remains in our genetics. You're suggesting I weaponize my telepathy. I'm suggesting you use every tool available to survive, Tors said. Kale is physically superior, but mentally, luminary minds are exponentially more complex than Crothay. In a telepathic assault, you'd have the advantage. If I even know how to do it, Seraphine said, if it doesn't kill me in the process. It might, Elder Lyron admitted. The old texts speak of telepaths who burned themselves out in combat, their minds consumed by the power they channeled. So she either dies in physical combat or burns out her brain trying psychic warfare, Mackenzie said. Great options. Do you have a better plan, Colonel? He didn't. That was the worst part. He'd run every tactical scenario he could think of, and they all ended the same way. Earth's destruction or Seraphine's capture. This at least offered a third option. Slim, desperate, but possible. How long do we have to prepare? He asked. Kale's deadline is 13 days out, Tors said. We'd need to issue the challenge within the week to give him time to accept and set terms. A week. Mackenzie looked at Seraphine. She stood very still, glowing faintly blue, processing the weight of what was being asked of her. I need to think, she said finally, alone. She left the lab without waiting for permission. Mackenzie moved to follow, but Elder Lyron stopped him with a gesture. Let her go, Colonel. This decision must be hers, freely made. And if she decides to do it, if she challenges him, then we help her prepare, Tors said, and we pray that courage and skill can overcome brute force. Mackenzie found Seraphine on the compound's observation deck hours later. She stood at the railing, looking out over the Montana wilderness. Snow had started falling again, soft and steady, covering the scarred earth where the drone attack had torn up the landscape. He approached quietly, giving her space but letting her know he was there. "When I was young," she said without turning, "my father used to take me to the Crystal Falls. It was this place where water fell from the mountains and caught the light of both our suns. The spray created permanent rainbows, hundreds of them, layers of color so beautiful it hurt to look at." Sounds amazing. He'd tell me stories there, about our ancestors, about how we chose peace over violence, about how the greatest strength was knowing when not to fight. She turned to face him. I believed him. Believed that there was always a peaceful solution. That violence was the choice of the weak and frightened. You don't believe that anymore. I believe the universe is more complicated than my father's stories. I believe sometimes violence finds you whether you want it or not. And I believe, she took a breath, I believe I have to fight, not because I want to, but because it's the only way to protect the people I care about. Mackenzie moved to stand beside her at the railing. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "What other way?" She gestured at the sky where Kale's fleet waited in orbit. "He won't stop. You know that. He'll wait out the deadline and then he'll start destroying cities until I surrender. How many deaths should I allow before I act?" "It's not your responsibility." "Of course it is. He's here because of me. Those people would be safe if I'd never come to Earth. Or they'd be facing the same threat eventually. Kale's been conquering systems for decades. Earth was probably on his list anyway." "You're trying to make me feel better." "I'm trying to tell you the truth." Mackenzie turned to face her fully. "Seraphine, if you do this, if you challenge him, there's a very real chance you'll die. And he stopped. I can't." "Can't what?" "Can't lose someone else." The words came out raw, more vulnerable than he'd intended. Seraphine's expression softened. "James," she used his first name, which she rarely did, "you're not losing me. I'm choosing to fight. There's a difference." "The outcome's the same." "No, the outcome of surrender is certain. I become his possession, his trophy, his thing. The outcome of fighting is uncertain. Maybe I die, but maybe I win. Maybe I get to live free. That uncertainty, that possibility, that's everything." He wanted to argue, wanted to find some logic that would change her mind. But he looked at her standing there, glowing with determination despite her fear, and he knew. This was her choice, her agency, the thing Kale had tried to take from her, and Mackenzie refusing to accept her decision would be just another form of control. "All right," he said finally. "If you're going to do this, then we do it right. We train, we prepare, we give you every possible advantage. You'll help me. Every step of the way." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin, stood up on her toes and pressed her forehead against his. It was a luminary gesture, he'd learned, intimate, trusting. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for trusting my choice." "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm terrified." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Where did you learn that?" "From my wife. She told me that the night before I deployed to Iraq, when I was scared out of my mind but trying not to show it." She sounds like she was very wise. She was. Mackenzie felt the familiar ache, but it was different now. Softer. Less like a wound and more like a scar. Something that would always be part of him but didn't have to define him. "Would she approve?" Seraphine asked. "Of this, of us?" "Us?" "You know what I mean." Yeah, he did. The connection that had been building between them. The way his heart rate picked up when she entered a room. The way her glow brightened when she saw him. The careful not touching that was somehow more intimate than any embrace. She would, he said. Rachel believed in love, in connection, in taking chances even when the smart money said don't. She'd tell me I was an idiot for waiting this long. Waiting for what? For this. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative. Her lips were warm and soft, and she tasted like starlight and hope. She made a small, surprised sound against his mouth. Then her hands came up to cup his face, and she was kissing him back. Her skin blazed bright gold, so intense that even with his eyes closed he could see the light through his eyelids. He felt her telepathy open, not invasive but inviting, and suddenly he could feel what she felt. The cascade of emotion, joy, desire, fear, hope, all of it tangled together in a knot that mirrored exactly what was in his own chest. They broke apart slowly. She was breathing hard, glowing so bright she looked like a star given human form. "Oh," she said. "Yeah. That was. Yeah." She laughed, the sound like bells. "I've wanted to do that for days." "Only days. I've wanted it since you fell on the landing pad and called me Winter." She pressed against him, her head fitting perfectly under his chin. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together, feeling each other's warmth. Finally, she said, "When this is over, when I've fought Kale and survived." "You mean if you survive?" "When," she insisted. "When I survive, I want this, us. I want to see where it goes." "Me too. Even though I'll outlive you by centuries. I've got a good 20 years left if I'm lucky. Maybe 30 if I stay out of trouble. That's enough time to make a lot of memories." "It's not enough time at all," she said, "but it's what we have, so we'll make it count." Every second, he promised. They stood together on the observation deck, watching the snow fall, feeling the weight of what was coming, but choosing to find peace in the moment anyway. Because sometimes that's all you could do. Find the small moments of grace between the chaos, hold onto them, let them sustain you through the darkness. Behind them, the compound prepared for war. But for now, for these few stolen minutes, there was just two people learning to hope again. The training began the next morning. Dr. Torres had converted one of the compound's cargo bays into a makeshift combat arena. Crash mats on the floor, holographic projectors that could simulate opponents, medical equipment standing by just in case. Mackenzie arrived to find Seraphine already there, dressed in simple exercise clothing that was utterly inadequate for what they were about to attempt. She looked small, fragile, nothing like someone who should be preparing to fight a genocidal warlord. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's begin anyway." Torres activated the holographic system. A shimmer in the air, then suddenly Kale Draxus stood before them. Not the real thing, but close enough. 8 feet of scales and muscle and barely contained violence. Seraphine flinched backward. "It's just a projection," Mackenzie said gently. "Photons and programming, it can't hurt you." "I know," she straightened. "I know, it's just. Seeing him brings it back." "Yes. We can stop, do this a different way." "No," she shook her head. "I need to face him, even a simulation. I need to." She took a breath. "I need to stop being afraid." Mackenzie walked over to the hologram, studied it. Kale's stance was aggressive, weight forward, ready to attack. His eyes were cold black pits, predator's eyes. "All right," Mackenzie said. "First lesson. You're not going to beat him with strength. He outweighs you by 600 pounds and he's genetically engineered for combat. Trying to match his power is suicide." "Then how do I win?" "You make him work for it, tire him out, use his aggression against him. He turned to Tors. Can you program movement patterns? Make him attack. Already loaded, Tors worked her controls. The holographic Kale moved, closing distance fast. Seraphine stumbled backward, barely keeping her feet. The hologram stopped just short of contact. Again, Mackenzie said, and this time don't retreat. Lateral movement, make him adjust. They ran the drill 50 times. Each time Seraphine got a little better, a little faster, learning to slip to the side instead of backing up, learning to watch Kale's center mass instead of his hands because the body moved first, hands followed. By noon, she was exhausted, her glow dimmed to almost nothing. Mackenzie called a break. You're doing good, he said, handing her water. Better than I expected. I'm too slow. She drank deeply. He'd catch me in a real fight. Probably, but that's not the point of this drill. The point is learning to move, learning to see his attacks coming. Speed comes with practice. We have 6 days. Then we practice for 6 days, around the clock if we have to. Elder Lyron arrived in the afternoon with ancient texts pulled from the Luminary archives, brittle digital files that hadn't been accessed in millennia, instructions for something their civilization had tried to forget. Telepathic warfare. The Elder spread the data across a holographic display, diagrams of luminary neural pathways, descriptions in flowing script that Mackenzie couldn't read, but Seraphine studied with growing horror. This is barbaric, she whispered. It's survival, Elder Lyron said. Our ancestors did what they had to. Now you must do the same. The technique was called mindfire in the old tongue, a telepathic assault that overloaded the target's neural pathways with sensation, pain, fear, every negative emotion amplified until the mind shut down to protect itself. It required absolute focus, complete emotional control, and it burned through the attacker's energy reserves like a wildfire through dry timber. Most telepaths who attempted it died, Elder Lyron said, their own minds consumed by the feedback. You must be prepared for that possibility. How reassuring, Mackenzie muttered. But the Elder continued, if done correctly, if the telepath maintains separation between their consciousness and the energy they're channeling, it can incapacitate even the strongest mind. Kale's not telepathic, Seraphine said. Will it work on him? All sentient beings have minds. All minds can be touched. The question is whether you have the strength and control to do it. Only one way to find out, Tors said. She gestured to a chair where sensors were set up. Colonel, we need a test subject. Mackenzie looked at the chair, then at Seraphine. You want to use this on me? Just a weak version, to see if she can establish the connection, to see if the technique even works on humans. I don't want to hurt you, Seraphine said quickly. You won't, I trust you. It was true, he realized. Somewhere over the past week, he'd come to trust this alien princess more than he'd trusted anyone since Rachel. Trust her with his safety, with his secrets, with the parts of himself he kept locked away. He sat in the chair. Tors attached sensors to his temples and chest, monitoring his vitals. All right, Tors said. Seraphine, whenever you're ready. Seraphine knelt in front of him, placed her hands on either side of his face. Her skin was warm, almost hot against his temples. Her eyes were huge and concerned. If it's too much, tell me. I'll stop immediately. I will. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath. Her glow intensified, shifting from gold to white. And then he felt it. A pressure in his mind, not painful, not yet, but present, like someone pressing gently against a door he'd kept locked, her consciousness touching his, questing, careful. Relax, she whispered. Let me in. He tried, tried to lower his walls, the defenses he'd built over decades of military service and personal loss. It was harder than he'd expected. His mind wanted to resist, wanted to protect itself. James, her voice in his head now, not his ears. Trust me. He did. He relaxed into it, let the pressure increase, let her presence flow into his consciousness like warm water. And suddenly they were connected. Not just surface emotions, but deeper. He could feel her fear of Kale, her determination to protect her people, her growing feelings for him that she tried to hide. Could feel the memory of the Crystal Falls, the beauty of 2 sons, the pain of losing her world. And she could feel him, all of him, Baghdad and the Marines who died under his command, Rachel wasting away in that hospital bed, the 5 years of empty routine and buried grief, the slow thawing that had started when Seraphine stumbled on that landing pad. It was intimate beyond anything physical, deeper than words, 2 minds touching, seeing each other completely. Then the pressure changed, sharpened. He felt heat building at the base of his skull, not painful yet, but getting there, a warning. Now I'll try the technique, her mental voice said. Just a touch. Tell me when it's too much. The heat intensified, became actual pain. He felt fear spike in his chest, primal and overwhelming. Felt his body respond, heart rate jumping, breathing accelerating. The sensors shrieked an alarm. Tors shouted something, and Seraphine pulled back instantly, breaking the connection. Mackenzie gasped, disoriented. His head throbbed, but the pain was already fading. Seraphine knelt in front of him, her face pale with concern. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you all right? He managed a shaky laugh. That would definitely work. Your vitals spiked hard, Tors said, checking her readouts. Heart rate hit 180, blood pressure through the roof, and that was just a fraction of full power. If I used full strength, Seraphine said quietly, it could stop his heart, or scramble his brain, or save your life, Mackenzie said. He caught her hands. Hey, look at me. She met his eyes. You have a weapon that can work. That's huge. That's the advantage we needed. But using it, she pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. It felt wrong, violating, like I was forcing myself into your mind. You were, with permission. Kale won't give you permission. He'll be trying to kill you. You do what you have to. Elder Lyron stepped forward. Princess, I know this is difficult. Our people abandoned these techniques because we valued peace over power. But sometimes peace must be defended with power. Your ancestors understood that. Now you must as well. Seraphine was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Teach me everything. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening. Seraphine practicing the connection, learning to build the pressure without losing herself in the feedback. Mackenzie served as her test subject, enduring repeated sessions of increasing intensity until his head pounded and his body shook with fatigue. But each time she got better, more controlled, more precise. By midnight, she could drop him to his knees with a thought, could make him feel terror so pure his body shut down, could scramble his senses until he couldn't tell up from down. And each time, she hated herself a little more. Mackenzie found her afterward in the showers, sitting on the floor with hot water streaming over her, crying. Her glow had gone dark, completely dark, something he'd never seen before. He sat down beside her, not caring that the water soaked through his clothes. Talk to me. I'm a monster, she said. What I did to you, what I'm learning to do, that's not who I am. No, you're someone learning to protect yourself, to protect billions of people. There's nothing monstrous about that. You don't understand. When I was in your mind, when I was causing you pain, part of me, a small part, she took a shuddering breath. Part of me enjoyed it, the power, The control, that's what Kale felt, what he feels when he hurts people, and now I feel it too. Mackenzie turned her face toward him gently. Listen to me. The difference between you and Kale, you feel guilty. You hate that small dark part. He celebrates it. He's built his entire existence around it. You're learning to use a tool you don't want for a cause that matters. That's not the same as enjoying cruelty for its own sake. How can you be sure? Because I know you, because I've felt your mind touching mine, and there's nothing but light in there. Compassion, love, the will to protect, that small dark part, that's just survival instinct. Every living thing has it. What matters is what you do with it. She leaned against him, exhausted. What if I can't control it? What if when I'm fighting Kale, that darkness takes over? Then I'll be there to pull you back. You can't be. It's single combat. You won't be allowed in the arena. Then you pull yourself back. You remember who you are. You remember what you're fighting for. She was quiet, just breathing. Finally, she said, "Will you stay with me tonight? I don't want to be alone." "Yeah, I'll stay." They made their way back to her quarters, both soaked and exhausted. She changed into dry clothes behind a screen while Mackenzie stood by the window, watching the snow fall. When she emerged, she looked younger somehow, vulnerable. She climbed into the bed and patted the space beside her. "Just sleep," she said. I need to feel someone close, someone real and warm and not in my head." He kicked off his boots and lay down beside her, staying on top of the covers. She curled against him, her head on his chest, one arm draped across his waist. "Tell me about the good times," she said softly. "With Rachel, the memories that don't hurt." Mackenzie stared at the ceiling, feeling Seraphine's warmth against his side, her breathing already starting to even out. "There was this trip we took," he said, "to the Grand Canyon. Rachel had never seen it. We drove out from base, just the two of us in this beat-up Ford pickup I'd bought for $300. Took us 12 hours because the truck kept overheating." Seraphine made a soft sound. He kept talking. "When we finally got there, sunset, the sky was on fire. Oranges and reds and purples like someone had set the horizon ablaze. Rachel just stood at the rim, staring, crying because it was so beautiful, and I remember thinking that I'd drive that broken truck forever, overheat 1,000 times, if it meant I got to see her face in that light." "That's beautiful," Seraphine murmured, half asleep. She made everything beautiful, even the hard things, even deployments and separations and all the fear that comes with military life. She'd write me letters, real letters on paper. Tell me about her students, about the garden she was trying to grow, about the cat that kept sneaking into our garage. And reading those letters in some desert halfway around the world. That's what kept me human. Kept me remembering there was more to life than missions and objectives. I wish I could have met her. She would have loved you, would have invited you over for dinner and insisted you try her terrible cooking, would have asked you a million questions about your world and your people, would have made you laugh even when you wanted to cry. She sounds perfect. She wasn't. She snored, left dishes in the sink, could never remember where she put her car keys, but she was perfect for me. Seraphine's breathing had slowed completely now. She was asleep, trusting him enough to let her guard down completely, trusting him to keep her safe while she rested. Mackenzie lay there in the dark, this alien princess curled against him, and felt something shift in his chest. The wall he'd built around his heart after Rachel died. It didn't crumble, didn't vanish, but it developed a crack, a small opening, just enough to let light through. And for the first time in 5 years, he thought maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let himself feel again. The week passed in a blur of training and preparation. Seraphine worked until she could barely stand, then worked more, learning to fight physically with Mackenzie, learning to fight mentally with Elder Lyron, pushing herself beyond every limit. Mackenzie watched her transform. She moved with more confidence now, more certainty. The frightened refugee who'd arrived 2 weeks ago had been replaced by someone harder, sharper, a weapon forged in necessity. But he also saw the cost. The way her glow dimmed a little more each day. The way she sometimes stared at nothing, lost in thoughts she wouldn't share. The nightmares that woke her gasping, convinced Kale was already there. On the 6th day, they issued the formal challenge, broadcast on all frequencies in accordance with Crothe law. Princess Seraphine Alyr challenged warlord Kale Draxus to single combat, victory to the death or submission, terms to be set by neutral arbiter. Kale's response came within the hour. His face filled every screen in the compound, that predator's smile showing too many teeth. "My beloved Seraphine, how delightful. You wish to dance with me? Very well. I accept your challenge. We fight in 3 days on neutral ground. Your primitive planet's moon will suffice. And when I defeat you as I will, you will return to me, not as my prisoner, as my willing bride. That is my term." The screen went dark. Seraphine stood very still, her glow flickering. Mackenzie could see her hands shaking. "We can call it off," he said. "Find another way." "No," her voice was steady even though her body wasn't. "This is what has to happen." Elder Lyron approached. "Princess, there is one more thing you must know, about Mindfire, about the cost." "What cost?" "Using it at full power, channeling that much energy. It will age you. Our bodies sustain telepathic abilities through life force. A full assault could cost you decades." She could have protested, could have refused. Instead, she just asked, how many decades? 20 years, perhaps 30. You would go from appearing young to appearing. The elder gestured, middle-aged by human standards. Mackenzie felt cold. 30 years. A substantial portion of a luminary lifespan. The cost was staggering. "That's not acceptable," he said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Seraphine said calmly. "And 30 years is nothing measured against billions of lives. I'll pay it." "Princess." "My decision is made, Elder." She turned to Mackenzie. "And before you argue, consider this. 30 years less means I'll live to perhaps 300 instead of 330. You'll live to perhaps 80. Either way, I outlive you by centuries. What does it matter if the gap is slightly smaller?" The logic was sound, but it still felt wrong. Still felt like she was sacrificing too much. The next 2 days were a countdown to something that felt like execution. Mackenzie stayed close to Seraphine, helping her prepare mentally and physically. They sparred. They talked. They spent quiet evenings just being together, trying not to think about what was coming. The night before the fight, neither of them could sleep. They sat in her quarters, the lights dimmed, just holding each other. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been trying trying to be brave, but I'm terrified." "Me too." She looked up at him. You've been to war, you've faced death." "Yeah, and I'm still scared. Being scared doesn't make you weak, Seraphine. It makes you smart." "What if I freeze? What if when I see him, really see him, not a hologram but him, I can't move, can't think?" "Then you remember your people counting on you. Remember everyone on Earth who voted to protect you. Remember." He touched her face gently. "Remember me. Remember this. Whatever we have, whatever this is becoming, that's worth fighting for." "Is it?" She searched his eyes. 2 weeks, James. We've known each other 2 weeks. How can that be enough to matter?" "Rachel told me once that love wasn't about time. It was about depth. About seeing someone truly and choosing them anyway. I see you, Seraphine, all of you. The scared parts and the brave parts and everything in between. And I choose you." Her eyes filled with tears. I choose you too." They kissed, deep and desperate, trying to compress a lifetime of feeling into one moment. Her skin blazed so bright that Mackenzie had to close his eyes against the glare. He felt her telepathy open, felt her pouring her emotions into him. Love and fear and determination and hope all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, she was crying. So was he. "If I don't come back," she started. "Don't. James, please, if I don't come back, I need you to know. You saved me, not from Kale, from giving up, from believing I was only worth what I could offer politically or strategically. You saw me as a person, that gift. I'll carry it into that arena. It will give me strength." "You'll come back," he said fiercely. "You'll win. And then we'll figure out how to build a life together, all the complicated, impossible logistics. We'll figure it out. Promise me, promise if I don't make it, you'll live, really live, not just exist. You'll find joy again." "Seraphine. Promise me." He wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her that if she died, he'd follow right behind. But he owed her honesty. "I promise, if you promise the same, if somehow I'm wrong and Kale wins, you find a way to survive, a way to escape, a way to live." "I can't." "You can. You already did it once. You ran from him and made it across the galaxy. If you have to run again, you run. And you keep running until you find somewhere safe. And spend the rest of my life alone. Better alone and free than together and owned." She pressed her forehead to his, that luminary gesture of intimacy and trust. "I love you," she whispered. "I don't know if I'm supposed to say that after only 2 weeks, if it's too soon or too fast or too much. But I do. I love you." "I love you too," Mackenzie said. "And yeah, it's fast, it's crazy, it defies all logic, and I don't care." They held each other through the night, neither sleeping, just being together, memorizing the feeling, the warmth, the simple, perfect comfort of another person's presence. When dawn came, pale and cold through the window, they both knew. The time for words was over. Now came the test. Now came the fight that would decide everything. The transport to the moon was somber. Mackenzie sat beside Seraphine, holding her hand. Across from them, Elder Lyron meditated. Dr. Torres checked equipment she'd brought to monitor the fight. General Patterson appeared via hologram, his expression grave. "The Croth I have set up an arena on the lunar surface," he said. "Atmospheric dome. Neutral observers from a dozen species. This is going to be broadcast across the galaxy." "Good," Seraphine said. "Let them all see what happens when you try to own someone who refuses to be owned." The landing was smooth. They disembarked into a facility that was temporary but sophisticated. The Croth I had been busy. The arena itself was a dome of transparent material, maybe 200 feet in diameter. Earth hung in the sky above, blue and white and impossibly beautiful. Inside the dome, Kale waited. He looked even larger in person than in recordings, a mountain of scaled muscle and controlled violence. He watched them approach with those dead black eyes, that predator's smile fixed on his face. Seraphine stopped walking. Her hand tightened on Mackenzie's. "It's all right," he said quietly. "Just breathe." I can't do this." "Yes, you can. Look at me." She turned, her eyes wide with terror. "You are Seraphine Alyr," Mackenzie said. "Princess of the Luminari. Survivor of 3 years of hell, the bravest person I've ever known. You can do this." "I'm not brave. I'm terrified." "Good, use it. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alert. Just remember your training, remember what you're fighting for." She took a shuddering breath, nodded. "I have to go now," Mackenzie said. "I can't be in the arena with you, but I'll be right outside, watching every second. And when you win, because you will win, I'll be the first one through those doors." When I win. When you win. She kissed him, quick and hard. Then she stepped away, straightening her shoulders, letting her fear transform into determination. Mackenzie watched her walk toward the arena entrance, watched her glow shift from frightened blue to resolved gold, watched her become the warrior she needed to be. Elder Lyron appeared at his side. She has a chance, Colonel, not a good chance, but a chance. That'll have to be enough. They took their positions in the observation area. Screens showed multiple angles of the arena. Medical teams stood ready. Diplomatic observers from species Mackenzie didn't recognize filled the viewing stands. Inside the dome, Seraphine and Kale stood facing each other. The neutral arbiter, an ancient being from some species that looked like living crystal, spoke in a voice that resonated through the facility. Combat will continue until death or submission. No weapons, no outside assistance. Begin. Kale moved first. He crossed the distance between them in 3 massive strides, faster than something that big should move. His fist came down in a hammer blow that would have crushed Seraphine's skull. She slipped left just like they'd practiced. The blow passed through empty air. Kale's momentum carried him forward, and Seraphine was already moving, circling, staying mobile. "Good girl," Mackenzie whispered. "Make him work for it." Kale attacked again, and again, driving forward with overwhelming aggression. Each attack could have ended the fight. Each attack missed by inches. 10 minutes in, Kale was breathing hard, frustrated. He'd been expecting an easy victory, expected Seraphine to fold immediately, but she was still standing, still moving, still alive. "Fight me," Kale roared. "Stop running." Seraphine didn't respond, just kept moving, kept dodging, conserving her energy while he burned his. 30 minutes. Kale's movements were slowing, not much, but enough. The slight hesitation before each attack, the fractional delay in his recovery. Seraphine saw it too. She changed tactics. Instead of just dodging, she started striking back. Quick hits to joints, to nerve clusters. Nothing that would do real damage but enough to accumulate. 1,000 cuts instead of 1 killing blow. Kale caught her once. His hand closed around her arm and Mackenzie's heart stopped. The warlord lifted her off her feet like she weighed nothing, drew back his other fist for the finish. Seraphine's eyes blazed white. Now, Mackenzie thought, do it now. Kale screamed. It was a sound of pure agony, inhuman and terrible. His hand released Seraphine and she dropped to the ground. Kale clutched his head, stumbling backward. She was doing it, the mindfire technique, pouring telepathic assault directly into his brain. Kale fell to his knees. Blood ran from his nose, from his ears. His body convulsed. Seraphine stood over him, her skin so bright she looked like a star. Her face was set in an expression Mackenzie had never seen. Fierce, merciless, powerful. On the monitors, her vital signs were spiking. Heart rate dangerous, neural activity off the charts. The technique was consuming her, burning through her life force like paper in flame. "Stop," Mackenzie whispered. "He's down. Stop before it kills you." But she couldn't hear him, or she was too deep in the technique to pull back. Kale collapsed completely. His body went limp. The monitors showed his brain activity dropping towards 0. Seraphine didn't stop. Elder Lyron grabbed Mackenzie's arm. She's lost in it. The feedback loop. She'll kill him and herself. "Open the door." "Colonel, we can't interfere." "Open the goddamn door." Torres was already moving, overriding the arena controls. The door slid open, and Mackenzie was running before it fully cleared. He burst into the arena. Seraphine stood over Kale's unconscious form, glowing white-hot, her hands extended, still channeling power into the defeated warlord. "Seraphine," Mackenzie shouted. "He's down, you won." She didn't respond. Her eyes were rolled back, showing only white. He crossed to her, grabbed her shoulders, felt the telepathic energy crackling over her skin like electricity. "Come back to me," he said. "Seraphine, come back. It's over. You won. Come back." Nothing. She was lost in the power, drowning in it. So he did the only thing he could think of. He pulled her against him, held her tight, let her telepathy flood into him, let her consciousness touch his. And in that mental space where their minds met, he spoke. "You promised," he said. "You promised you'd come back, that we'd figure out a life together. You promised." He felt her awareness flicker, recognize him. "James." "I'm here, I've got you. But you need to let go, you need to stop." "I can't, the power, it's..." "Yes, you can. You're stronger than this. Stronger than the technique. Stronger than the fear. Let it go." In the physical world, her glow began to fade. The terrible white light dimming to gold, then blue, then nothing. She collapsed and Mackenzie caught her, lowering them both to the ground. Around them, the arena erupted in chaos. Medical teams rushing in, observers shouting, the arbiter declaring Seraphine the victor. But Mackenzie only had eyes for her. She was breathing, alive, but she looked different. Her skin had lost some of its luminescence. Fine lines appeared around her eyes. Her hair, which had been pure silver, now showed streaks of darker blue. The cost, the 30 years, all of it visible in moments. Her eyes fluttered open, found his face. "Did I win?" she whispered. "You won. It's over. You're safe." "Kale." "Alive, unconscious but alive. You showed mercy." "I didn't mean to. I meant to kill him." "But you didn't. When I called you back, you chose to stop. That's what matters." She touched his face weakly. "You broke the rules. Entered the arena." "Yeah, I did. Court-martial me later." She smiled. It was tired but genuine, worth it. Medical teams swarmed them. Dr. Torres pushing through, scanner already out. "We need to get her to medical," Torres said. "Now." They loaded Seraphine onto a stretcher. Mackenzie held her hand the whole way. Didn't let go even when they reached the medical bay. Didn't let go when Torres tried to shoo him out. "I'm staying," he said. "Colonel." "I'm staying." Torres looked at him, then at Seraphine, then sighed. "Fine, but stay out of the way." He pulled up a chair beside the medical bed. Seraphine's eyes were closed, but she was still holding his hand, still alive, still here. Behind them, through the medical bay windows, he could see Kale being loaded onto a Krotha ship. Defeated, humiliated, bound by honor to withdraw. Earth was safe. The Luminari would find sanctuary. And Seraphine had won her freedom. The cost had been high, 30 years of her life. The trauma of using a technique she'd hated. The weight of coming so close to becoming the monster she fought. But she was free. And she was his. And that, Mackenzie thought, was worth any price. He sat in the quiet medical bay, holding the hand of an alien princess who taught him how to hope again, and waited for her to wake. When she did, he'd be there. He'd always be there. That was a promise he intended to keep. Seraphine woke 3 days after the fight. Mackenzie was there, exactly where he'd been for 72 hours straight, beside her bed, holding her hand, refusing to leave even when Dr. Torres insisted he needed rest. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on his face. She blinked, confused, then memory seemed to return. Her free hand went to her face, touching the lines that hadn't been there before. "James." Her voice was hoarse from disuse. He squeezed her hand gently. "Hey, welcome back." "Did I?" She stopped. Swallowed. "Did I win?" "You won. Kale's fleet withdrew 12 hours after the fight. He's bound by honor. He can't come back." Tears filled her eyes and spilled over, glowing faintly as they tracked down her changed face. "It's really over. It's really over. You're free." She pulled his hand to her face, pressed it against her cheek. The skin was still warm, still had that faint electrical current beneath the surface, but it felt different somehow, more settled, less fragile. "I look different," she said. "I can feel it." Mackenzie had been preparing for this moment, trying to find the right words, but in the end, honesty was all he had. "Yeah, you do. The technique aged you, just like Elder Lyron warned." "How much?" "Tors estimates 30 years, maybe a little more. You were burning so hot at the end." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, she asked, do I look terrible?" Mackenzie leaned forward, cupping her face with both hands now, making sure she was looking directly at him. "You look beautiful. Different, yes, but beautiful. You've got lines around your eyes now, some silver in your hair that wasn't there before. Your skin doesn't glow quite as bright. And none of that changes the fact that you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "You're biased." "Damn right I am, but I'm also telling the truth." She studied his face, her telepathy reading him. Whatever she felt there seemed to reassure her because she relaxed slightly. 30 years, she said. I traded 30 years for freedom. Worth it. She smiled. The expression transformed her face, making the new lines seem like they'd always belonged there. Every second. Dr. Tors entered, scanner in hand. She stopped when she saw Seraphine was awake. "Well, look who decided to rejoin the living. How do you feel?" "Tired, sore, different but alive." Tors ran her scanner, studying the readouts. "Your vitals are stable. Neural activity is back to normal. The aging appears to be permanent, but there's no other lasting damage. You're extraordinarily lucky, Princess." "I had help." Seraphine looked at Mackenzie. "He pulled me back, stopped me from burning myself out completely." "He violated about 6 different protocols doing it," Tors said. "But given the outcome, I think we can overlook that." "General Patterson wants to speak with you both when you're ready," Tors continued. "The UN is calling it the victory that saved Earth. You're being hailed as a hero across the planet." "I don't feel like a hero," Seraphine said quietly. "I feel like someone who barely survived." "That's what heroes usually feel like," Mackenzie said. "The ones who lived anyway." Elder Lyron visited that afternoon. The ancient luminari took one look at Seraphine, and their expression crumpled with grief. "Princess, what have you done to yourself?" "What I had to," Seraphine said. She was sitting up now, still weak but getting stronger. "I saved my people. I saved this world. I'd do it again." "But the cost was mine to pay." She reached out, took the elder's hand. "I'm alive, Lyron. I'm free. Those are gifts beyond price. A few decades of my lifespan, that's nothing." "Your mother would be devastated to see you like this." "My mother understood duty. She would approve of my choice." Elder Lyron was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps you're right. And perhaps," the elder's gaze shifted to Mackenzie, "perhaps she would approve of other choices you've made as well." Seraphine's glow brightened slightly. A faint blush. "We haven't. There's been no formal." "I have eyes, Princess, and I am not blind to the connection between you. The way he has not left your side in 3 days, the way you reach for him even in sleep. This is beyond duty or friendship." Mackenzie felt suddenly uncomfortable. This wasn't a conversation he'd expected to have with an alien elder who'd lived 3 centuries. Sir, Elder Lyron held up a hand. I am not objecting, Colonel, merely observing and offering. The elder paused, offering my blessing if such a thing matters to you. It does, Seraphine said softly. Thank you. After the elder left, Seraphine turned to Mackenzie. Her expression was uncertain. We should talk about us, about what happens now. Mackenzie pulled his chair closer to the bed. Okay, let's talk. Everything's changed. I'm not the same person who challenged Kale. I look different. I feel different. And you, she touched his face, you've been through hell watching me fight, watching me almost die. That changes things too. Yeah, it does. So where does that leave us? Mackenzie took her hand, threaded his fingers through hers, right where we were before, 2 people trying to figure out how to build something together. Even though I look like this now. Especially because you look like this now. You earned every one of those lines, Seraphine. They're proof you survived, proof you fought. I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't hurt seeing what you sacrificed, but you're still you. The person I fell in love with, that hasn't changed. I fell in love with you too, so fast it terrified me. Still terrifies me, Mackenzie admitted. I've got maybe 20 years left. You've got 300. That math doesn't work in any kind of rational way. No, but when has love ever been rational? Fair point. She shifted on the bed, making room. Will you just hold me for a while? I've been alone in my head for 3 days, and I need to feel connected to something real. He kicked off his boots and climbed onto the bed carefully, mindful of her injuries. She curled against him immediately, her head on his chest, one arm across his waist. The position was familiar now, comfortable. They lay like that for a long time, not talking, just being together, feeling each other breathe, finding peace in the simple fact of survival. Finally, Seraphine said, when I get out of here, when I'm recovered, I want to see your world, really see it, not just military compounds and political meetings. I want to understand what you're fighting to protect. I'd like that. Where do you want to start? Everywhere. She smiled against his chest. Show me the Grand Canyon where Rachel saw the sunset. Show me the ocean. Show me the places that matter to you. That could take a while. We have time. Not as much as before, but enough. Let's not waste it. Seraphine was released from medical after a week. She was still weak, still adjusting to her changed body, but she insisted on attending the formal ceremony the UN had organized. The ceremony was held in New York in the General Assembly Hall. Representatives from every nation on Earth, diplomats from a dozen alien species, media coverage that reached billions. Mackenzie stood in dress uniform, medals he'd earned in 3 wars catching the light. Seraphine wore robes of luminary silk, but simpler than her royal garments, more personal. The Secretary General spoke first, praising Seraphine's courage, thanking her for the sacrifice that had saved Earth. Then it was Seraphine's turn. She approached the podium slowly, still not completely steady on her feet. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall. I did not fight Kale Draxus to be a hero, she said. I fought because I was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of being treated as property instead of a person. My victory was not just military, it was personal. It was claiming my right to exist on my own terms. She paused, her gaze sweeping the assembly. Many of you see me as alien, as other, as fundamentally different from humanity. But in the past month, I have learned that we are not so different. We all want freedom. We all want safety for those we love. We all want to live lives that matter. These are universal truths that transcend species. Earth chose to protect me when it would have been easier to surrender me. That choice. That stand for principle over expedience. That is what gives me hope for the future. Hope that different species can coexist, can cooperate, can build something better together than they ever could alone. The applause was thunderous. Seraphine stepped back from the podium, swaying slightly. Mackenzie was there immediately, offering his arm. She took it gratefully. Later, at the reception, they were surrounded by people wanting to meet her, to shake her hand, to hear her story. Seraphine was gracious, answering questions, accepting congratulations. But Mackenzie could feel her exhaustion building through their physical contact. After an hour, he made their excuses and got her out of there. They found a quiet balcony overlooking the East River. The night air was cool, the city lights reflecting off the water. "Too much?" he asked. "Just enough." She leaned against the railing. "I'm not used to being celebrated. On my world, I was just—" She gestured vaguely. "A piece on a political board. Here, people see me as a person who did something meaningful. It's strange." "Get used to it. You're going to be famous for a while." "I don't want to be famous. I want to be normal." "You're a telepathic alien princess who defeated a warlord in single combat and saved the world. Normal might be out of reach." She laughed, "When you put it that way." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the river. Finally, Seraphine said, "I've been thinking about what comes next. For me, for my people. And the UN has offered sanctuary, space for the Luminari to settle, but I'm not sure I want to stay on Earth permanently." Mackenzie felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You're leaving." "No, not leaving, but not staying here either. She turned to face him. "I want to build something new. A place where Luminari and humans can live together, learn from each other. Show the galaxy that different species can coexist as equals." "That's ambitious." "Someone recently told me that bravery is acting despite fear. I'm choosing to be brave." "Where would you build this?" "There's a moon, one of Jupiter's, Europa. It has water potential for terraforming. It's far enough from Earth to be independent but close enough to maintain ties. I've been talking to scientists. They think it's possible." Mackenzie studied her face. "This is important to you." "It's everything." She took his hands. "James, I don't want to just survive. I don't want to be a refugee forever. I want to build, to create, to leave something behind that matters. A home for my people that's truly ours, but that welcomes others too." "That'll take years, decades." "I know, and she stopped, looked away. "I know that asking you to be part of that is asking a lot. You have a life here, a career, roots." "Had a life here," Mackenzie corrected gently. "Had a career. Rachel and I never put down roots because we were always moving for military assignments. And now," he touched her face, making her look at him, "now I'm thinking maybe it's time to plant new ones, somewhere that matters." "You'd come with me, to Europa." "If you'll have me. I'm getting too old for military service anyway. They're already talking about retirement. This could be my next mission, building something instead of just protecting it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You'd leave Earth, your whole world." "Seraphine, you are my world now. Wherever you go, that's where I want to be." She kissed him. Right there on the balcony with the city lights reflecting off the water and the sound of the reception filtering through the glass doors behind them. Kissed him like he was the answer to every question she'd ever asked. When they broke apart, she was glowing gold, bright enough that people inside probably noticed. She didn't care. "Build it with me," she said. "Build a home, a future, everything." "Everything," he agreed. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. Seraphine met with UN officials, scientists, engineers. Plans were drawn up for the Europa colony. The first Luminari refugees began arriving from their dying homeworld. Resources were allocated. Treaties were signed. Mackenzie retired from the Marine Corps after 30 years of service. The ceremony was small, just the way he wanted it. General Patterson presented him with his final medal and a handshake that conveyed more than words. "You've served with honor," Patterson said, "and now you're serving in a different way. I'm proud of you, James." "Thank you, sir." "Take care of her, and let her take care of you." "I will." Dr. Torres threw him a retirement party at the Montana compound, the same place where everything had started. Seraphine came with him, looking around at the facility that had been her prison and her sanctuary. "This is where we met," she said, standing on the landing pad where she'd first stumbled in the snow. "Where you caught me. Best catch I ever made." She smiled. The lines around her eyes deepened. Mackenzie had grown to love those lines. They were proof of everything she'd survived. Sergeant Cross approached, now a lieutenant. He'd been promoted after his actions during the drone attack. He shook Mackenzie's hand firmly. "Going to miss you, sir. You taught me a lot." "Stay sharp, Cross. And remember, the best warriors know when not to fight." "Yes, sir." After the party, Mackenzie and Seraphine walked through the compound one last time, visiting the library where they'd had their first real conversation, the observation deck where they'd kissed, the training room where she'd learned to be a warrior. "So many memories," she said, "in such a short time." "Quality over quantity," Mackenzie said, "always." They left Montana the next day, headed for Florida, where the first transport to Europa would launch in a month. But Mackenzie had made a promise to show Seraphine his world first. They drove across the country in a rented car, taking the scenic routes, stopping at roadside diners and tourist traps and national parks, seeing America the way most Americans never did. At the Grand Canyon, Seraphine stood exactly where Rachel had stood years before. The sunset was just as spectacular, oranges and reds and purples painting the vast emptiness. She cried, not from sadness but from the overwhelming beauty of it. Mackenzie stood behind her, arms around her waist, chin on her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, "for sharing this with me, for sharing her with me." She'd want you to see it. She'd want you to feel what she felt. "I wish I could have known her." "In a way you do, through me, through the things she taught me, the way she saw the world, that's all still there." They visited the ocean in California. Seraphine had never seen that much water. She stood in the surf, letting the waves crash around her legs, laughing like a child. Mackenzie took pictures, capturing her joy. In Yellowstone, they watched Old Faithful erupt, saw bison and elk and wolves. Seraphine was fascinated by Earth's wildlife, by the diversity of life that had evolved here. "Your world is so alive," she said, "so vibrant. No wonder humans are the way you are. You had to be adaptable to survive here." "We're survivors," Mackenzie agreed. "It's what we do best." In New Orleans, they ate beignets and listened to jazz. In Chicago, they stood at the top of the Willis Tower and looked out over the city. In Washington, D.C., they visited the war memorials. Mackenzie showed her the names of Marines he'd served with, friends who hadn't made it home. Seraphine touched the engraved names gently. "They're why you fight," she said. "Not for abstract concepts, for these people, for the ones you lost." "And for the ones I didn't lose." He touched her hand. "For you." They saved Montana for last, drove back to the same overlook where Mackenzie had proposed, where they'd decided to build a future together. It was early spring now. The snow was melting. Wildflowers were beginning to push through the earth. Everything felt like renewal, like possibility. Mackenzie pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal 2 rings. Simple bands, one silver, one gold. I know your culture doesn't do marriage the same way humans do, he said, but I was hoping. He took a breath, hoping you'd wear this anyway, as a symbol of us, of the life we're building. Seraphine's hands were shaking as she took the silver band. It fits, she said, sliding it onto her finger. How did you know my size? I asked Elder Lyron. Figured the person who's known you since childhood would have that information. She laughed through her tears. You're very thorough. Marine training. Always prepare for the mission. Is that what I am? A mission? You're the mission, the only one that matters anymore. She took the gold band from the box and slid it onto his finger. It was slightly loose. His hands had gotten thinner in the past months, age and stress catching up. In my culture, she said, we do this. She placed her hand over his heart. Feel my light. Let it join yours. Become part of each other in a way that transcends the physical. Her skin began to glow, warm gold light that seemed to seep into him. He felt her telepathy open, felt her consciousness brush against his. But it was different this time, not intrusive, inviting. He lowered his walls completely. Let her in. Let her see everything. The good and the bad, the strength and the weakness, the love and the fear, all of it. And she gave him the same. Her memories of the Crystal Falls, her years with Kale, the loneliness of being political property, the joy of finding freedom, the love she felt for this scarred human soldier who'd chosen her. When they pulled apart, something had changed. A connection deeper than words, deeper than any ceremony. They were bonded in a way that went beyond either of their cultures. So Seraphine said, her voice shaky, are we married now? By Luminari standards, yes. By human standards, we'd need a ceremony, paperwork, legal stuff. Then let's do both. Honor both our worlds. They were married a week later. Small ceremony at the Montana compound. Dr. Torres officiated, having got herself ordained online for the occasion. Elder Lyron stood as Seraphine's witness. General Patterson stood as Mackenzie's. Seraphine wore a simple white dress. Mackenzie wore his dress uniform one last time. The ceremony blended human vows with luminary bonding rituals. When Torres pronounced them married, Seraphine's glow was so bright the photographers' cameras couldn't capture it properly. At the reception, Mackenzie danced with his wife. Slow circles in the compound's mess hall that had been decorated with flowers and lights. She fit perfectly against him, her head on his shoulder, both of them swaying to music only they could hear. I never thought I'd do this again, Mackenzie admitted. After Rachel, I thought that part of my life was over. I'm glad you were wrong. Me too. Dr. Torres cut in, pulling Seraphine away for a dance. She leaned close and said something that made Seraphine laugh. Mackenzie watched them, this alien princess and human scientist who'd become unlikely friends. General Patterson appeared at his elbow. Drink. Mackenzie took the offered glass. Whiskey, good whiskey. They drank in companionable silence for a moment. You did good, son, Patterson said. Not just today, all of it. Thank you, sir. Rachel would be proud. You know that, right? Mackenzie felt his throat tighten. I hope so. I know so. Patterson clapped him on the shoulder. Now go dance with your wife. Stop standing around with an old man. Mackenzie reclaimed Seraphine from Torres. They danced until late, surrounded by the handful of people who mattered most, building memories, creating new traditions. When the party finally wound down, they walked back to their quarters hand in hand. The night was clear, stars visible despite the compound lights. Look, Seraphine said, pointing. Jupiter, our new home is up there, waiting for us. Nervous. Terrified, excited, both. Good combination for starting something new. They stood looking up at the stars for a long moment. Then Seraphine turned to him. "Take me to bed, husband. We have a long journey ahead tomorrow. I want tonight to just be us." He did, and it was. The launch to Europa was scheduled for dawn. Mackenzie and Seraphine boarded the transport with 100 other colonists. 50 humans, 50 luminari, the first wave of the settlement. Elder Lyron was among them, having chosen to leave Earth and help build the new colony. Dr. Torres stayed behind, promising to visit once the first structures were complete. The transport was massive, a collaboration between human engineering and luminari technology. It would take 3 months to reach Europa, 3 months in the void between worlds. Mackenzie strapped into his seat beside Seraphine, held her hand as the countdown began, felt the rumble of engines coming online. "Last chance to change your mind," she said. "Not a chance. You're stuck with me now." "Good." The launch was smooth, G-forces pressing them into their seats as they accelerated away from Earth. Through the viewport, Mackenzie watched his homeworld shrink, blue and white and impossibly precious. He'd been born on that planet, had spent 58 years there, had fought for it, bled for it, loved and lost on its surface. And now, he was leaving it behind to build something new. "Are you sad?" Seraphine asked, leaving Earth. "A little, but mostly." He squeezed her hand. "Mostly I'm looking forward, to what we're building, to the future." She smiled. "That's all we can do. Look forward, keep building, keep choosing hope over fear." The transport reached orbit, Earth below them, Jupiter ahead, and somewhere in between, their future waiting to be made real. Europa exceeded every expectation. The moon was harsh and beautiful, ice plains stretching to the horizon, geysers erupting from deep ocean vents, the massive presence of Jupiter dominating the sky. The first months were brutal. They lived in prefab habitats while permanent structures were built, worked 18-hour days, faced equipment failures and supply shortages and the simple grinding difficulty of building civilization from nothing. But slowly, structures rose, dome cities to hold atmosphere, geothermal plants to provide power, greenhouses for food, a spaceport for supply ships. Mackenzie found himself in an unexpected role, not a soldier anymore, not a guard, but a builder, a planner, someone who helped solve problems and mediate disputes between human and luminari colonists. He was good at it, better than he'd expected. Turns out 30 years of military leadership translated well to colony organization. Seraphine threw herself into the work with fierce determination. She designed the Central District, created spaces that honored both human and luminari aesthetics, built something that felt like home to everyone. A year into the settlement, they stood together looking out over what they'd built. A city rising from the ice, lights glowing in the eternal twilight, home to 3,000 people now, human and luminari living side by side. "We did this," Seraphine said, "created something that didn't exist before. We're not done yet, still a long way to go. But we started, that's what matters." The colony grew, more ships arrived, more people, engineers, scientists, artists, teachers, families. The population doubled, then tripled. They had problems, cultural misunderstandings between species, equipment failures, a bout of illness that spread through the human population, political tensions about governance structure. But they worked through it, found solutions, compromised, adapted. On their second anniversary, Mackenzie surprised Seraphine with a garden. A real garden built in one of the largest domes. Earth plants and luminari plants growing together. A riot of color and life. She cried when she saw it, touched the flowers with gentle fingers. This This is what I dreamed of, life, growing, thriving. I had help. Tors sent seeds from Earth. Elder Lyron provided luminary specimens from the refugee ships. We couldn't recreate the crystal falls, but... It's perfect. She turned to him. You're perfect. I'm really not. I'm old and creaky and I complain about the cold. You're perfect for me. That's what counts. They walked through the garden hand in hand, found a bench beneath a tree that Tors had labeled as Maple Earth Variety, Acer saccharum. Sat together watching the strange light of Jupiter filter through the dome. Do you miss Earth? Seraphine asked. Sometimes. Miss the sky. Miss gravity that doesn't require dome adjustment. Miss knowing where I fit in the world. And now I'm figuring out where I fit here. With you, building this. Do you regret it, coming here? Mackenzie thought about that. Thought about Earth and all he'd left behind. The familiarity. The history. Then he looked at Seraphine. At the lines on her face that matched the lines on his now. At the life they were building together. Not for a second. 5 years in, the colony was thriving. Population of 15,000. Self-sufficient in food and power. Trade agreements with Earth and other colonies. A working government that represented both species equally. Mackenzie and Seraphine lived in a modest house near the Central District. Nothing fancy, just a place that was theirs, filled with mementos from Earth and luminary cultural items, a blend of both their worlds. Mackenzie was 63 now. The years showed, more gray in his hair, more lines on his face. The old war wounds aching more frequently in Europa's controlled climate. But he was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way he hadn't been since Rachel. Seraphine had aged too, though more slowly. She looked perhaps 50 in human terms now, still beautiful, still glowing, though more softly than before. They'd grown old together, which felt right somehow. One evening, they received an unexpected transmission. Dr. Tors calling from Earth. Her face appeared on the screen, older too, but smiling. Hello, you two. I hope I'm not interrupting. Never, Seraphine said. It's wonderful to see you. I wanted to let you know. We've been studying the luminary sun, the one you thought was dying. Mackenzie felt Seraphine tense beside him. Tors continued. We were wrong about the timeline. Your people have more time than we thought. The star won't go critical for another 1,000 years. Seraphine's hand found Mackenzie's, squeezed tight. She stopped, cleared her throat. That's wonderful news. It means most of your people can return home if they want. Tors said, or stay. Build lives in both places, have a choice. Thank you for telling us, Mackenzie said. After the call ended, Seraphine was very quiet. Do you want to go back? Mackenzie asked. See your homeworld again. She considered, eventually, to visit, to show you the crystal falls and the cities and everything I've told you about. But to live, no, she looked around their home. This is home now, what we've built here, together. You're sure? I'm sure. My people have their world. They can return, rebuild, thrive. And I have mine, here with you. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. I love you. I love you too, more than I thought was possible. They sat together in their modest house on Europa, looking out at the city they'd helped build. At the life they'd created from nothing. At the future still stretching ahead. Mackenzie was 63. Seraphine was 132. By any rational calculation, their relationship made no sense. Different species, different lifespans, different worlds. But love had never been about rational calculations. It was about moments, choices, the decision to show up for someone every single day, to build something together even when the odds said it was impossible. They'd lost things to get here. Seraphine had lost 30 years of her life. Mackenzie had left behind his entire world. Both had sacrificed more than most people would. But what they'd gained, a home, a purpose, each other, that was worth any price. 10 years after the colony's founding, they held a celebration. The population had reached 50,000. The city sprawled across Europa's surface, beautiful and functional and alive. The celebration included people from a dozen species now. Europa had become a haven, a place where anyone could come to build a new life, to start over, to prove that different didn't mean incompatible. Mackenzie stood on a platform, looking out over the crowd. Seraphine beside him. Elder Lyron had asked them to say a few words, to mark the occasion. He wasn't much for speeches, never had been, but he tried. 10 years ago, he said, his voice amplified across the square, this place was nothing but ice and dreams. A handful of us stood on bare ground and imagined what could be, and then we built it, together. He paused, looking at Seraphine. She smiled encouragement. I've spent most of my life fighting, he continued. Fighting wars, fighting enemies, fighting for survival. But the past 10 years, these have been about building, creating, choosing hope over fear. And I've learned something. Building is harder than fighting. It takes more courage, more faith, more stubborn determination to keep going when things get difficult. The crowd was silent, listening. But it's also more rewarding. Because at the end of the day, you can look around and see what you've made. See the lives you've improved, the future you've created. That's worth more than any battle I've ever fought. He stepped back. Seraphine moved forward. When I came to Earth, she said, I was running, fleeing, looking for any refuge that would take me. I never imagined I'd find. She gestured at the city around them. This, a home, a purpose, a family that spans species and worlds. Her glow brightened as she spoke. Europa is proof that different species can coexist, can cooperate, can build something beautiful together. We have our conflicts, our misunderstandings, our challenges, but we work through them. We choose understanding over fear, connection over isolation. Every single day we choose each other. She looked at Mackenzie. The love in that look was visible to everyone. And that choice, that daily recommitment to building together, that's what makes us strong. That's what gives me hope for the future. Not just for Europa, but for the galaxy. Because if we can make this work, this impossible, improbable, beautiful experiment, then anything is possible. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers in a dozen languages, luminary glowing bright with emotion, humans shouting approval, other species joining in with their own cultural expressions of joy. Mackenzie and Seraphine descended from the platform together, hand in hand, partners in every sense of the word. Elder Lyron was waiting at the bottom. The ancient luminary looked at them with something like pride. You've done well, Princess. Better than anyone could have hoped. We did it together, Seraphine corrected, all of us. Perhaps, but it started with you, with your courage, your vision. The party continued late into the night. Music and dancing and celebration. Different cultures sharing traditions, finding common ground, building connections. Mackenzie danced with his wife beneath Europa's dome. Jupiter massive overhead, the city lights reflecting off the ice, everything they'd built surrounding them. Tired? Seraphine asked. Exhausted, but happy. Good combination. They slipped away from the party eventually, walked home through streets they'd helped plan, past buildings they'd helped raise, through a city that existed because they'd had the courage to imagine it. In their house, they prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage. He brushed his teeth. She adjusted the lights to her preferred setting. They moved around each other with practiced ease. In bed, she curled against him, the position they'd slept in for 10 years now, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders, perfect fit. James. Yeah. Thank you for all of this, for choosing me, for building this life with me. Thank you for letting me, for seeing past the broken old soldier to the person who still wanted to matter. You've always mattered, even when you couldn't see it. They lay in comfortable silence for a while. Then Mackenzie said, I've been thinking. Dangerous, she teased. Seriously, I'm 68 now. My body's, he paused. I'm not going to live forever, Seraphine. We need to talk about what happens when I'm gone. She stiffened against him. Don't. We have to. I need to know you'll be okay. That you'll keep building, keep living. Not just existing, but really living. I don't want to think about that. I know, but I need you to promise me. When I'm gone, you find joy again. You don't spend the next 200 years mourning. You live. You love again if you want. You build and create and keep choosing hope. Promise me. She was crying now, silent tears soaking into his shirt. I promise, she whispered, but only if you promise to fight, to stay with me as long as you can, to not give up. I promise. Every day I wake up next to you is a day worth fighting for. They held each other through the night, both knowing that time was finite, that every moment was precious, that eventually one of them would have to say goodbye. But not tonight. Tonight they had each other, had their home, had the life they'd built against all odds. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 15 years after arriving on Europa, Mackenzie woke to find he couldn't get out of bed. His body simply wouldn't cooperate. Everything hurt. Everything was heavy. Seraphine called for medical help immediately. They transported him to the colony hospital, ran tests, gave him drugs for the pain. The doctor was gentle when she delivered the news. Heart failure. His body was finally giving out after 73 years of hard use. How long? Mackenzie asked. Weeks, maybe, not months. Seraphine took his hand, held it tight. After the doctor left, they sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Mackenzie said, I'm sorry. Don't you dare apologize. You gave me everything. 15 incredible years. A home, a purpose. Love I never thought I'd find. Don't you dare apologize for being human. I wanted more time. Me too, but we can't always get what we want. We get what we get. And what we got. She touched his face. What we got was beautiful. They moved him home after a few days, set up medical equipment in their bedroom, hospice care, making him comfortable. Elder Lyron visited every day, sitting with them, sharing memories of the early days, talking about how far the colony had come. Dr. Torres made the journey from Earth. Took 3 months, but she came. Sat at Mackenzie's bedside and told him stories about the Montana compound, about Sergeant Cross, now a colonel, about the world he'd left behind. You made a difference, James, Torres said. Not just here. Back on Earth, too. You showed people what courage looks like, what love looks like, what it means to choose building over destroying. I just did what needed doing. Exactly. That's what heroes do. At night, when the visitors were gone, Seraphine would lie beside him, careful not to jostle him, just being close. Tell me about Rachel, she'd say. Tell me about the good times. And he would, sharing memories he'd kept locked away for so long, making sure Seraphine knew all of it, the love he'd had before, the life he'd lived. She sounds wonderful, Seraphine said one night. She was, different from you, but wonderful. Do you think, she hesitated, do you think she'd approve of us? Mackenzie smiled. I know she would. She always wanted me to be happy, to find love again. She'd like knowing I did, that I had this. I'm glad. On his last day, Mackenzie woke to find the house full of people. Elder Lyron, Dr. Tors, colony leaders, friends they'd made over 15 years, all of them gathering to say goodbye. He was too weak to talk much, but he squeezed hands, nodded acknowledgement, let them know he understood, that he appreciated them being there. As evening came, they left one by one, until it was just him and Seraphine. She climbed into bed beside him, wrapped herself around him carefully. Her tears fell on his shoulder. I don't know how to do this, she whispered, how to let you go. The same way you do everything else, with courage, with grace, one moment at a time. I love you so much. I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. You gave me a reason to live, Seraphine. After Rachel, I was just going through the motions. Waiting to die, you made me want to live, to build, to matter. That's a gift beyond measure. You matter, you'll always matter, to me, to this place, to everyone whose lives you touched. His breathing was getting harder, slower. He could feel his body shutting down, could feel the end approaching. Don't be afraid, Seraphine said. I'm here, I've got you. Not afraid, tired, so tired. Then rest, it's okay, you can rest now. He looked at her one last time, memorized her face, the lines they'd earned together, the love in her eyes, the light that still glowed softly even through her grief. Build something beautiful, he whispered. Keep choosing hope. I will, I promise. His eyes closed, his breathing slowed, and surrounded by love in a home he'd helped create on a world he'd chosen, James Mackenzie let go. The funeral was held in the garden he'd built for her, every flower in bloom, the dome overhead showing Jupiter's massive presence. Thousands attended, human and luminary and others, all of them gathering to honor a man who'd built bridges between worlds. Seraphine stood at the front, dressed in white, as was luminary custom for celebrating a life. She didn't speak, couldn't find words adequate to express what he'd meant to her. Elder Lyron spoke instead, about courage, about love, about choosing to build even when destruction would have been easier. Dr. Tors spoke about the soldier she'd known, the friend, the man who'd never given up even when the odds were impossible. They laid him to rest beneath the maple tree, earth soil brought from Montana, a headstone that read simply, James Mackenzie, builder, protector, beloved. Seraphine stayed after everyone left, sat beside the grave, placed her hand on the earth above him. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. I will keep your promise, I will live, I will choose hope, every day. For as long as I have left, I will make you proud. The wind moved through the garden, rustling the leaves, carrying her words away. She stood eventually, walked back to the house they'd shared. The space felt enormous without him, empty. But it was still home, still the place they'd built together, still full of memories and love and evidence of a life well lived. She would grieve, would miss him every day, would feel the absence like a physical wound. But she would also live, would keep building, would honor his memory by choosing joy over sorrow, hope over fear. Because that's what he would have wanted. That's what love required. And so she did. 10 years after Mackenzie's death, Seraphine stood in the garden again, but she wasn't alone. 3 children played among the flowers, human children, orphans from the colony that she'd adopted, giving them the family they'd lost, giving herself purpose beyond grief. Elder Lyron sat on the bench, watching the children with contentment. He would be proud, the elder said, of what you've built, what you've become. I hope so, Seraphine said. She was 147 now, still had centuries ahead. But she'd learned that time was meaningless compared to how you spent it. The colony thrived. Population of 200,000 now. A beacon of cooperation in the galaxy. Proof that different species could build something beautiful together. Seraphine had served as colony governor for 5 years, had helped write the Constitution, had mediated countless disputes, had built and built and built. In the evenings, she still visited the garden, still sat beside the maple tree, still talked to Mackenzie as if he could hear. She told him about the children, about colony politics, about the new ships arriving, about life continuing. And sometimes, when Jupiter's light hit the flowers just right, when the wind moved through the leaves in a particular way, she could almost feel him there. Could almost hear his voice telling her she was doing good. Keep going, keep building. She would, she had promised. And Seraphine Alyr always kept her promises.